2 hours before Charlotte Bennett was supposed to marry one of Chicago's most respected attorneys, she locked herself in the bridal suite and sent a text to the only man who had ever broken her heart. "If you still want me, come get me." What she didn't know was that Ethan Hayes had been watching over her from the shadows for years, waiting for exactly this moment. When a helicopter descended on her wedding ceremony and a dangerous man stepped out to claim her in front of everyone, Charlotte's perfect life shattered, and the truth about both men finally came to light. If you're watching this story, please hit like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Charlotte Bennett had always believed she was good at reading people. It was a skill she'd inherited from her mother, who could spot a liar across a crowded room, and her father, who'd built a successful construction business in Chicago by trusting his gut about which contractors would deliver and which would disappear with the deposit. Charlotte had grown up learning to watch how people held themselves, how their voices changed when they were hiding something, how their eyes would shift just before they said something they didn't quite believe. So when she looked back later, the thing that haunted her most wasn't that Nathan Calloway had fooled her. It was that some part of her had known all along and she'd chosen to ignore it. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the wedding. Charlotte was supposed to meet Nathan for lunch at the restaurant where they'd had their first date. His idea, something romantic and sentimental that had made her smile when he suggested it. But he'd canceled 20 minutes before, texting that a client emergency had come up. She'd been disappointed but understanding. Nathan was a partner at Morrison & Hale, one of Chicago's oldest and most prestigious law firms. Client emergencies were part of the package. She was walking back to her car when she saw him. Nathan was half a block away, standing outside a coffee shop Charlotte had never seen him enter before. He wasn't alone. A woman stood with him, dark-haired and pretty, holding a little boy who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. Nathan had his hand on the small of the woman's back, the same way he touched Charlotte when they walked together. The gesture was too familiar, too comfortable. The woman was laughing at something Nathan had said, and the little boy was reaching for Nathan's face with sticky fingers. Nathan leaned in and kissed the child on the forehead. Charlotte stood frozen on the sidewalk, her brain struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. Maybe it was his sister. Maybe it was a colleague's wife and child. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation that would make her feel foolish for even questioning it. But Nathan didn't have a sister. And the way that woman looked at him, that wasn't how you looked at your husband's colleague. Charlotte didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, she turned around and walked quickly back to her car, her hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. She drove home in a daze, her mind spinning through possibilities, each one worse than the last. She told herself she was overreacting. She told herself she'd ask him about it later, casually, and he'd explain everything and she'd feel ridiculous for doubting him. She told herself a lot of things that afternoon, and she didn't believe any of them. That night, Nathan came over with flowers and apologies for canceling lunch. He kissed her, made dinner, asked about her day at the art gallery where she worked as a curator. He was charming and attentive and everything a fiancé should be. Charlotte watched him move around her kitchen, opening her cabinets like they were his own, pouring wine into her glasses, and she felt like she was looking at a stranger. "Nathan," she said carefully, "where were you today, really?" He didn't even pause. "I told you, sweetheart, client meeting. The Henderson case is getting complicated. Which coffee shop?" Now he looked at her. "What? You said you were at the office. I'm just wondering which coffee shop you were at when I called." His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Something cold. "I didn't say I was at a coffee shop. I was at the office." "Right," Charlotte said softly. "My mistake." She didn't push it. Not that night. But she also didn't sleep. She lay awake next to Nathan, listening to him breathe, and tried to remember when she'd stopped trusting her own instincts. Tried to remember when playing it safe had become more important than being honest with herself. The answer came to her sometime around 3 in the morning. It had started the day Ethan Hayes disappeared from her life. Ethan. Even now, 7 years later, thinking his name felt like touching a bruise that had never quite healed. Charlotte had trained herself not to think about him, had built walls around those memories so high and thick that most days she could pretend they didn't exist. But lying there in the dark with Nathan's lies hanging in the air between them, the walls crumbled. She was 17 the first time she saw Ethan Hayes. He'd shown up at her family's house on a September afternoon, standing on the front porch with a garbage bag containing everything he owned and an expression that said he expected to be turned away. Charlotte's father had brought him home from the construction site where Ethan had been working off the books, trying to make enough money to eat. He was 16, too thin, and so guarded that he barely spoke above a whisper. His mother died last month, Charlotte's father had explained quietly to his wife and daughter. Foster system's a mess. He's been sleeping in a friend's car. I told him he could stay in the guest room until we figure something out. Charlotte's mother, whose default response to any problem was to feed people, had immediately started making up a plate. Charlotte, who'd been annoyed at having her after-school routine interrupted, had taken one look at Ethan's face and felt something crack open in her chest. He looked terrified, trying to hide it, but terrified. "The bathroom's upstairs," she'd said, softer than she'd intended. "Second door on the left. There's towels in the closet if you want a shower. Dinner's in 20 minutes. Ethan had stared at her like she'd said something in a foreign language. Then, very quietly, "Thank you." That was how it started. Ethan stayed for a week, then 2, then a month. Charlotte's parents formally fostered him, and suddenly Charlotte had something she'd never expected to have. A brother. Except Ethan had never felt like a brother. He was quiet and careful, always watching, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. He did his homework at the kitchen table without being asked, kept his room obsessively clean, and said please and thank you like they were prayers that might keep him safe. He worked construction with Charlotte's father every afternoon and weekend, saving every penny. He barely talked about his mother or the years before her death, or anything that had hurt him, and Charlotte could tell that almost everything had hurt him. But slowly, carefully, he started to relax. He started to smile at Charlotte's jokes, started to argue with her about movies and music, started to sit next to her on the couch instead of in the chair across the room, started to look at her like she was something more than just the daughter of the people who'd taken him in. Charlotte fell in love with him the way you fall asleep, slowly, and then all at once. It happened the night of her 18th birthday. Her parents had thrown her a party, invited half the neighborhood, made a cake that was too sweet and too big. Ethan had been quiet all evening, watching from the edges of the room the way he always did at gatherings. But when everyone had left and Charlotte was cleaning up in the kitchen, he'd appeared next to her with a small wrapped box. "I didn't know what to get you," he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. "But I saw this and thought of you." Inside was a silver bracelet, simple and delicate, with a tiny charm in the shape of a bird in flight. It must have cost him weeks of construction wages. "Ethan, you didn't have to, you're always talking about traveling," he'd interrupted. "Going to Paris, seeing the museums, all of it. I know you're going to fly away someday. I just wanted you to have something to remember that someone was watching you get ready to go." Charlotte had looked up at him, this careful, wounded boy who'd learned to hide every feeling behind a wall of silence, and saw that the wall had cracks in it. Saw him looking at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had never stopped shifting under his feet. "I don't want to fly away from you," she'd whispered. Ethan had gone very still. "Charlotte, I mean it. Whatever happens, wherever I go, I want you there." He'd kissed her then, soft and uncertain and perfect, and everything had changed. They'd kept it secret at first, worried about what her parents would think, worried about ruining the fragile stability Ethan had finally found. But secrets in a house that small didn't last long. Charlotte's mother had figured it out within a week, and instead of the anger or disappointment Charlotte had feared, she just pulled them both aside and said, "Be careful with each other. You're both precious to me, and if you hurt each other, I'll have 2 heartbroken children instead of 1. Charlotte's father had been quieter about it, more watchful, but he'd never told them to stop. He'd just made Ethan promise to treat Charlotte right, and Ethan had sworn he would with an intensity that made Charlotte's chest ache. They had 2 years together. 2 years of Ethan showing up at her college campus between his construction jobs, bringing coffee, and stealing kisses in the library. 2 years of Charlotte teaching Ethan how to let someone love him, how to believe he deserved good things. 2 years of making plans for a future that felt, for the first time in both their lives, like something solid. Then one Friday night, Ethan hadn't shown up for dinner. Charlotte had called him 6 times, texted him a dozen more. Nothing. By midnight, she'd been frantic. By morning, she'd been at his apartment, pounding on the door, demanding answers from neighbors who just shrugged and said they hadn't seen him in days. His apartment was empty, completely empty, like he'd never lived there at all. Charlotte's father had tried to find him, called in favors, asked around the construction sites, even filed a missing person report. But Ethan Hayes had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. For months, Charlotte had been convinced something terrible had happened to him, that he'd been hurt or killed or taken. She'd barely eaten, barely slept. Her parents had been terrified she was going to break completely. It wasn't until her father sat her down 6 months later and showed her the bank records. Ethan had withdrawn every penny from his savings account the day before he disappeared, that Charlotte had accepted the truth. He'd left her, chosen to leave, walked away without even the courtesy of a lie to soften the blow. That was when something in Charlotte had gone cold and hard. She'd stopped crying, stopped looking for him, stopped believing that love was anything but a pretty story people told themselves before reality showed up and proved them wrong. She'd graduated college, taken the job at the gallery, built a life that was careful and controlled and safe. When Nathan Calloway had walked into the gallery 2 years ago, confident and successful and completely transparent, Charlotte had recognized him for what he was. The opposite of Ethan Hayes. Nathan was all surface, no hidden depths. What you saw was what you got. He'd never disappear in the middle of the night because he'd never make her care enough to notice if he did. Except that wasn't true either, was it? The morning after she'd seen Nathan with the woman and child, Charlotte called in sick to work and did something she'd never done before in their entire relationship. She went through Nathan's things. She felt sick doing it, hated herself for it, but she also couldn't stop. His laptop was password protected, but his tablet wasn't. She found the emails first, dozens of them, going back 18 months. The woman's name was Jennifer. She lived in Evanston, in a house that Nathan was paying the mortgage on. The little boy was named Michael. He was 3 years old. He was Nathan's son. Charlotte had to run to the bathroom and throw up. When she came back shaking, she kept reading. The emails were casual, domestic. Jennifer asking Nathan to pick up diapers on his way over. Nathan saying he'd be late for Michael's bedtime, but he'd try to make breakfast. Jennifer sending photos of Michael's first day of preschool. They read like emails between a married couple. Because that's what they were. Nathan had been living 2 completely separate lives. Marriage to Jennifer, engagement to Charlotte. Jennifer knew about Charlotte. The emails made that clear. She called Charlotte that gallery girl, talked about how inconvenient the wedding was going to be, how Nathan had promised it was just for appearances, for his career. The partnership at Morrison and Hale had required a certain image, and Jennifer, as Nathan had apparently explained to her, didn't fit that image. Charlotte did. Charlotte was the respectable one, the suitable one, the one you put in the wedding photos and introduced to clients. Jennifer was the one he actually loved. Charlotte sat on her living room floor, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she'd thought her life was going to be, and tried to breathe through the rage. Not heartbreak. She realized with distant surprise that her heart wasn't broken at all. She hadn't loved Nathan enough for that. No, what she felt was fury. At Nathan, for the lies. At Jennifer, for being complicit. At herself, for being so desperate for safety that she'd ignored every red flag. She should call off the wedding. She should throw him out, blast the truth all over social media, ruin him the way he'd tried to use her. She was reaching for her phone to do exactly that when Nathan's key turned in her front door lock. He walked in smiling, carrying takeout bags from her favorite restaurant. "Feeling better, sweetheart? I thought I'd bring you lunch." He stopped when he saw her face, saw the tablet in her hands. For just a second, real fear flickered across his expression. Then it was gone, replaced by something calm and cold. "I can explain," he said quietly. "I don't want your explanations." Charlotte's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and hard. "I want you to leave. The wedding is off. We're done." Nathan very carefully set down the takeout bags. Then he walked over to her couch and sat down, like he had every right to be comfortable in her space. "No," he said pleasantly. "We're not." Charlotte stared at him. "Excuse me?" "The wedding is in 3 weeks, Charlotte. Everything is arranged. My entire firm is invited. The senior partners, clients, everyone who matters to my career. I'm not canceling it because you got your feelings hurt." "My feelings? Nathan, you have a whole other family, and that has nothing to do with you." His voice was still calm, still pleasant, and that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. "Jennifer understands the situation. She's fine with it. You're the only one making this complicated." "I'm calling off the wedding," Charlotte repeated. She stood up, needing to put distance between them. "And if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." Nathan laughed. Actually laughed. "And tell them what? That your fiancé has a complicated personal life? They'll be very sympathetic, I'm sure. I'll tell everyone. I'll go to your firm. You'll do nothing." Nathan stood up too, and now the pleasant mask was cracking. "Do you know what I do for a living, Charlotte? I destroy people in court. I find every vulnerable point, and I exploit it until they have nothing left. Do you really think you're special? That you're going to be the one person who walks away from me with your life intact?" Charlotte's mouth had gone dry. "Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality to you." Nathan walked toward her, and Charlotte found herself backing up until she hit the wall. "Your father's construction business, the one that's kept your family comfortable your entire life, exists because of permits and inspections and 1,000 little regulatory details that could go very wrong if the right people ask the right questions. I have friends in the city attorney's office, friends in the inspector's office, friends everywhere that matters. You can't. I can. I will. And that's just your father. Your mother volunteers at that community center on the south side, doesn't she? The one that barely keeps its funding every year? I'm on the board that approves that funding. Your college roommate, the one who just opened the bakery downtown, she's operating on some very generous loan terms that could be called in immediately if certain banking regulations were suddenly enforced." Charlotte felt like she couldn't breathe. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I need this wedding to happen," Nathan said simply. "Because Morrison and Hale is about to make me the youngest senior partner in the firm's history, and that requires a very specific image. A beautiful, accomplished wife from a good family. Someone respectable. Someone like you. In 6 months, when the partnership is official, we can quietly divorce. I'll be generous in the settlement. You can tell people whatever story you want about why it didn't work out. But right now, in 3 weeks, you're going to walk down that aisle and smile and say, 'I do,' or everyone you care about is going to pay for your selfishness." He said it all in the same calm, reasonable tone he might use to explain a contract clause. Like destroying her life and the lives of everyone she loved was just another negotiation. Charlotte couldn't move, couldn't speak. She felt paralyzed, pinned to the wall by the sheer casual cruelty of it. Nathan checked his watch. "I have to get back to the office. Think about what I said. Really think about it. Ask yourself if your pride is worth your father losing everything he's built. I'll see you at the cake tasting on Thursday." He picked up the takeout bags, kissed her on the forehead like nothing had happened, and walked out of her apartment. Charlotte slid down the wall and sat on the floor, shaking. Her phone was still in her hand. She looked at it, thinking about all the people she could call. Her parents, the police, a lawyer of her own. But Nathan was right. He'd destroy them all. He had the connections, the resources, the absolute willingness to burn it all down just to prove he could. Charlotte had seen him work, had listened to him talk about cases he'd won by finding his opponent's pressure points and crushing them. She'd thought it was impressive, admirable even. She'd never imagined she'd be on the receiving end of it. She was trapped, completely, utterly trapped. Unless... Charlotte's thumb hovered over her contacts list. There was a number there she'd never deleted, even though she'd told herself 1,000 times she should. A number she hadn't called in 7 years, hadn't even looked at in 7 years. She opened it now, stared at the name, Ethan Hayes. The rational part of her brain was screaming that this was insane. Ethan was gone. He'd made his choice when he'd walked away without a word. He clearly didn't want anything to do with her. And even if by some miracle he still had the same number, even if he answered, what exactly did she think he was going to do? He was a construction worker who disappeared into thin air. What could he possibly do against someone like Nathan Calloway? But Charlotte wasn't feeling rational anymore. She was feeling desperate and terrified and so angry she could barely see straight. And underneath all of that, underneath 7 years of hurt and walls and forcing herself not to care, was a memory, a promise. Made on a rooftop on the south side of Chicago, under stars you could barely see through the light pollution on one of those perfect summer nights when you're young enough to believe promises mean something. Ethan had held her hand and said, "If you ever need me, I don't care where I am, I don't care what I'm doing, you call and I'll come." Charlotte had laughed and kissed him and promised the same thing back. They'd been so stupid, so young. But the memory was there, sharp and clear, and Charlotte had nothing else left to hold on to. She typed out a message, deleted it, typed it again. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hit the right keys. Finally, she sent 2 sentences. "If you still want me, come get me. I'm getting married in 3 weeks and I need help." She hit send before she could change her mind. Then she sat there on her apartment floor surrounded by the ruins of her life and waited for nothing to happen. Because that's what happened when you called on ghosts. Nothing. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. The message was short. Address, date, time. Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. She sent him the details. The venue, the date, the time of the ceremony. She didn't explain about Nathan's threats, didn't tell him about Jennifer or Michael or any of it. She just sent the information and waited. The response came back immediately. "I'll be there. Don't marry him, Charlotte." Then, "I never stopped wanting you." Charlotte read those words over and over until they blurred. Then she put her phone down, pulled her knees to her chest, and let herself cry for the first time since Nathan had walked out of her apartment. She cried for the girl who'd believed in promises, for the woman who'd thought safety was the same thing as love, for all the choices she'd made that had led her here, trapped between a man who saw her as a prop and a ghost who'd broken her heart 7 years ago. She had no idea which one was going to destroy her more completely, but at least now she had 3 weeks to find out. The next 3 weeks passed in a surreal haze. Charlotte went through all the motions of a bride preparing for her wedding. She smiled at the caterer, approved the flower arrangements, had her final dress fitting. Nathan played the role of the attentive groom, showing up for every appointment, holding her hand in front of witnesses, acting like he hadn't threatened to destroy her entire family if she didn't perform on command. In private, he was different, colder, more watchful. He'd taken her phone one night while she was sleeping and gone through it. She'd woken up to find him standing over her bed, scrolling through her messages. "Who's Ethan Hayes?" he'd asked casually. Charlotte's heart had stopped, but she'd learned something from Nathan, how to lie with your whole face. "College boyfriend." "Why?" "You texted him 3 weeks ago." "Wrong number. I was trying to reach my friend Evelyn. They're next to each other in my contacts." Nathan had studied her for a long moment. Then he'd handed back her phone and walked out without another word. Charlotte had waited until she heard his car pull away before she ran to the bathroom and threw up again. She didn't hear from Ethan again. No calls, no texts, nothing. Part of her wondered if she'd imagined the whole exchange. Part of her wondered if he'd changed his mind, realized she wasn't worth the trouble. Part of her, the part she didn't want to acknowledge, wondered if he'd ever really meant those promises at all. Her parents knew something was wrong. Her mother kept watching her with worried eyes, asking if she was sleeping enough, if she was eating enough, if she was happy. Charlotte lied and said she was just stressed about the wedding. Her father was quieter about it, but she caught him looking at Nathan with an expression she'd never seen before. Distrust, maybe even dislike, but she couldn't tell them. Couldn't risk Nathan making good on his threats. So she smiled and lied and felt herself fracturing a little more each day. The morning of the wedding, Charlotte woke up at 5 a.m. in the bridal suite at the venue, her heart pounding like she'd been running. Her bridesmaids were asleep in the adjoining room. She was alone. She walked to the window and looked out at the garden where, in 8 hours, she was supposed to marry Nathan Calloway. The chairs were already set up, white and perfect. The arch where they'd say their vows was covered in flowers that had cost more than some people's cars. Everything was beautiful. Everything was ready. Charlotte felt like she was going to crawl out of her skin. Her phone buzzed. For one wild second, she thought it might be Ethan, but it was just her mother texting that she was on her way over with breakfast and mimosas. Charlotte put the phone down and made herself breathe. In and out, in and out. 8 more hours. She could survive 8 more hours. Then this would all be over, one way or another. Charlotte's mother arrived at 7 with a basket full of pastries that Charlotte couldn't imagine eating and champagne that she desperately wanted to drink straight from the bottle. Rebecca Bennett was a small woman with sharp eyes and an unsettling ability to read her daughter's face like a book written in a language only she could understand. "You look terrible, she's thin," she said, setting down the basket and immediately moving to Charlotte's face, tilting it toward the light. "When did you last sleep?" "Actually sleep, not just lie there thinking?" "I'm fine, Mom." "You're a terrible liar. You always have been." Rebecca guided Charlotte to a chair and started unpacking the basket. "Sit. Eat. We have 2 hours before hair and makeup gets here, and I'm not letting them work on you until you have something in your stomach." Charlotte picked at a croissant, tearing off small pieces she couldn't quite bring herself to swallow. Her mother watched her in silence for a long moment. "Charlotte," she said finally, "if you don't want to do this, you don't have to." Charlotte's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "What?" "The wedding. If you don't want to marry Nathan, we can call it off right now. I'll handle everything. I'll talk to the guests, deal with the venue, return the gifts. Your father and I will figure out the money. You don't have to go through with this if something's wrong." For one wild, desperate second, Charlotte almost told her everything. About Jennifer and Michael. About Nathan's threats. About the text she'd sent to a ghost 3 weeks ago and the silence that had followed. But then she thought about her father's business. About the permits Nathan could revoke with a single phone call. About her mother's community center losing its funding, and the words died in her throat. "Nothing's wrong," Charlotte said. She forced herself to smile. "I'm just nervous. That's normal, right? Every bride gets nervous." Rebecca didn't look convinced. "Charlotte, I love him, Mom. I want to marry him." The lie tasted like ash, but Charlotte held her mother's gaze and didn't look away. After a moment, Rebecca sighed and reached across to squeeze Charlotte's hand. "All right," she said quietly. "But if you change your mind, even if it's 5 minutes before you're supposed to walk down that aisle, you tell me. Promise me that." Charlotte promised, adding one more lie to the pile that was already threatening to bury her. Her bridesmaids showed up an hour later, filling the suite with noise and laughter, and the kind of aggressive cheerfulness that made Charlotte want to scream. They popped champagne, took selfies, talked about how beautiful everything was going to be. Charlotte smiled and nodded and felt like she was watching herself from very far away. The hair and makeup team arrived at 9. They worked on Charlotte for 2 hours, transforming her into someone who looked like a bride, someone radiant and happy and completely in love. Every time Charlotte caught her reflection in the mirror, she saw a stranger. "You look absolutely stunning," one of the bridesmaids gushed, snapping another photo. "Nathan's going to lose his mind when he sees you." Charlotte wondered if Nathan had spent the morning with Jennifer. If he'd kissed his son goodbye before coming here to play the role of devoted groom. The thought made her stomach turn. Her phone, lying on the vanity among the scattered makeup brushes and hairpins, stayed silent. By 11:30, Charlotte was fully dressed. The gown was beautiful, ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, a dress she'd spent months choosing and thousands of dollars buying. It fit perfectly. She looked exactly like the bride she was supposed to be. She also felt like she couldn't breathe. "I need a minute," she said abruptly, cutting through the excited chatter of her bridesmaids. "Alone, just give me a minute." They exchanged glances but filed out, leaving Charlotte standing in the middle of the bridal suite in a dress that cost more than her first car. She walked to the window and looked out at the garden again. Guests were starting to arrive. She could see Nathan talking to some of his colleagues from Morrison and Hale, looking relaxed and confident in his tuxedo. He glanced up toward her window, and even from this distance, Charlotte could see the warning in his eyes. "Don't mess this up." Her phone buzzed. Charlotte nearly tripped over her dress diving for it, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. But it wasn't Ethan, it was her father. "Almost ready, sweetheart?" "I'm outside when you are." Charlotte stared at the message. In 30 minutes, her father was going to walk her down that aisle and give her away to a man who was blackmailing her into marriage. And he had no idea. None of them had any idea. She typed out a reply. Almost ready. Love you, Dad. Then she opened her texts and scrolled to Ethan's name. The last message was still the one she'd sent 3 weeks ago, the one he'd answered with a promise. There'd been nothing since. Charlotte's hands were shaking as she typed, "Are you coming?" She hit send and waited. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Nothing. Charlotte felt something crack inside her chest. Of course he wasn't coming. He'd probably deleted her message 10 minutes after receiving it, laughed at the idea that she thought he'd drop everything to rescue her from a mess she'd made herself. He'd left her once without a word. Why had she thought he'd come back? She was about to put the phone down when it buzzed in her hand. "I'm already here." Charlotte's breath stopped. She read the message 3 times, certain she'd imagined it. Then another message came through. "Don't marry him. I meant what I said." "Charlotte?" Her mother's voice came from outside the door. "Honey, it's time." Charlotte looked at her phone, at the garden below where Nathan was waiting, at her reflection in the mirror, a bride in a beautiful dress, perfectly styled, ready to walk into a marriage that would destroy her piece by piece. She thought about Ethan's promise, made on a rooftop 7 years ago. She thought about this boy who'd looked at her like she was the only stable thing in a world that had never stopped trying to break him. She thought about the man he'd become, whoever that was, and the fact that he was here, somewhere, waiting. "Charlotte!" Her mother knocked again, more urgently. "We need to go." Charlotte took one last look at herself in the mirror. Then she picked up her bouquet, squared her shoulders, and opened the door. "I'm ready," she said. She wasn't sure if she was lying. The walk from the bridal suite to the garden felt like moving through water. Everything was too bright, too loud, too real. Charlotte held her father's arm and tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other. The music started, some classical piece she'd chosen months ago and couldn't remember the name of now. Guests turned to look at her, smiling and murmuring about how beautiful she was. Nathan stood at the altar, watching her approach. He looked perfect, handsome and successful, and exactly like the man every woman was supposed to want to marry. When Charlotte met his eyes, she saw the threat there, sharp and clear. "Go through with this, or everyone you love pays." Charlotte's father squeezed her arm gently as they walked. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" he murmured so quietly only she could hear. "Yes," Charlotte whispered back, the lie automatic now. "Because your mother told me what she said earlier. And if you're not sure if there's something wrong, we can turn around right now. I don't care about the money or the guests or any of it. I care about you." Charlotte felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she couldn't afford to cry. Not now, not with Nathan watching. "I'm sure, Dad. I promise." Her father didn't look convinced, but he kept walking. They were halfway down the aisle when Charlotte saw him. He was standing at the back of the garden, partially hidden by one of the decorative trees the venue had placed around the perimeter. Most people wouldn't have noticed him. He was dressed in dark clothes that helped him blend into the shadows, and he wasn't moving, wasn't drawing attention to himself. But Charlotte had spent 2 years learning every angle of his face, every way he held himself, every tiny detail that made him Ethan Hayes. She'd recognize him anywhere. He looked different, older, obviously. 7 years would do that. But it was more than that. The boy she'd known had been thin and wary, always slightly hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. The man standing in the shadows was broader, stronger, and carried himself with a kind of absolute stillness that was somehow more intimidating than any aggressive posture could have been. He was watching her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Charlotte stumbled slightly, and her father caught her elbow. "Easy, Matt," he said. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Charlotte managed. But she wasn't fine. Her heart was racing, her hands were shaking, and every instinct she had was screaming at her to run. But toward Nathan, or toward Ethan, she couldn't tell. They reached the altar. Her father kissed her cheek, placed her hand in Nathan's, and stepped back. Nathan's grip was firm, possessive. He was smiling at her like she was the love of his life. "You look beautiful," he said softly, just for her. Then quieter. "Don't do anything stupid." The officiant was a woman Charlotte had met twice before, someone Nathan had selected from a list of approved choices. She had a kind face and a warm voice that felt completely wrong for the moment. "Dearly beloved," she began, and Charlotte stopped listening. She was looking at Ethan. He hadn't moved from his position by the tree, but his eyes were locked on her. She couldn't read his expression from this distance, but she could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing. The officiant was talking about love and commitment and the sanctity of marriage. Charlotte heard Nathan respond at the appropriate moments, his voice confident and clear. She forced herself to do the same, reciting words that meant nothing. "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be wed," the officiant said, "speak now or forever hold your peace." It was a formality. No one ever actually objected at weddings. It was a line from movies and romantic comedies, not real life. The silence stretched out. Charlotte could hear birds singing in the trees, could feel the sun warm on her bare shoulders, could smell the overwhelming sweetness of the flowers surrounding the altar. Nathan's hand tightened on hers. The officiant opened her mouth to continue, and then Charlotte heard it. The sound of helicopter rotors, distant at first, then growing rapidly louder. Guests started murmuring, looking around in confusion. Nathan's grip on Charlotte's hand went from tight to painful. The officiant paused, clearly uncertain whether to continue or wait for the noise to pass. The helicopter appeared over the tree line, black and sleek, and flying lower than any aircraft should have been over a private event. It circled the garden once, rotors whipping the carefully arranged flowers and sending napkins flying from tables. Women grabbed at their hats and dresses. Men shouted in alarm. Nathan's face had gone white. What the hell? The helicopter descended into the garden itself, landing on the pristine lawn about 30 feet from where Charlotte and Nathan stood. The noise was deafening. The downdraft from the rotors destroyed what was left of the carefully styled decorations. Half the guests were on their feet, backing away. Someone was screaming. The helicopter's door opened. Ethan Hayes stepped out like he was arriving at a business meeting, not crashing a wedding in the most dramatic way possible. He was wearing all black, dress pants, a black shirt, no tie. He looked completely calm, like commandeering a helicopter and landing it in the middle of someone's ceremony was something he did every Tuesday. He also looked dangerous in a way Charlotte had never seen before. The boy who'd been so careful, so quiet, so desperate to avoid conflict, that boy was gone. The man walking toward her now moved like someone who'd stopped being afraid of consequences a long time ago. Behind him, two other men climbed out of the helicopter. They were big, dressed in dark suits, and they moved with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested they weren't just friends Ethan had brought along for moral support. Nathan found his voice. "What the hell do you think you're doing? This is a private event. I'll have you arrested for—" Ethan ignored him completely. He walked straight up the aisle, his eyes never leaving Charlotte's face, and stopped directly in front of her. Up close, Charlotte could see all the ways 7 years had changed him. There were scars she didn't remember, a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But his eyes themselves, dark brown, almost black, those were the same. And the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the garden, in the city, in the entire world, that was the same too. "Charlotte," he said quietly. His voice was rougher than she remembered, deeper. "You called. I'm here." Charlotte couldn't speak, couldn't move. She was dimly aware that Nathan was saying something, that the guests were all staring, that her mother had stood up from her seat looking absolutely shocked. But all she could focus on was Ethan, standing there in the wreckage of her wedding, offering her a way out. "Who the hell are you?" Nathan demanded, trying to step between Charlotte and Ethan. One of Ethan's men moved so fast Charlotte almost missed it. Suddenly he was there, a wall of muscle and expensive suit, blocking Nathan from getting any closer. The other man had positioned himself on Charlotte's other side, creating a protective triangle. Ethan still hadn't looked at Nathan. "Charlotte," he said again, "do you want to marry this man?" Of course she does," Nathan sputtered. "We're in the middle of the ceremony. This is insane. Someone call the police." "I'm not asking you, Ethan said, and there was something in his voice that made Nathan take a step back. "Charlotte, simple question. Do you want to marry Nathan Calloway?" Every person in the garden was watching her, her parents, her friends, Nathan's colleagues, all the carefully curated guests who'd been invited to witness her perfect wedding to her perfect fiancé. She could feel their eyes on her, could practically hear their thoughts. This was crazy. This was a scene from a movie, not real life. People didn't crash weddings with helicopters. People didn't show up after 7 years of silence and ask you to run away. But Ethan had. And he was standing there waiting for her answer like her response was the only thing in the world that mattered. Charlotte thought about Nathan's threats, about Jennifer and Michael, about the life Nathan had planned for her, 6 months of playing the perfect wife, then a quiet divorce and a payoff to keep her mouth shut, about the look in Nathan's eyes when he told her he'd destroy everyone she loved if she didn't cooperate. She thought about Ethan's promise, made on a rooftop when they were too young to know that some promises were impossible to keep. She thought about the fact that he'd kept it anyway. "No," Charlotte whispered, then louder. "No, I don't want to marry him." Nathan's face went from white to red. "Charlotte, think about what you're doing. Think about your father, your mother, everyone who—" "Let's go," Ethan said simply. He held out his hand. Charlotte looked at his hand, looked at Nathan, who was staring at her with fury and disbelief, looked at her parents, her father standing now, looking between Charlotte and Ethan with an expression she couldn't quite read, her mother with her hand pressed to her mouth. "Charlotte, don't be stupid," Nathan hissed. "You have no idea what I can do, what I will do. I will destroy—" "You won't do anything," Ethan said, and now he finally looked at Nathan. Whatever Nathan saw in Ethan's face made him stop talking mid-sentence. "You're not going to threaten her. You're not going to contact her. You're not going to say her name. Because if you do, what I do to you will make anything you threatened her with look like a kindness. We clear?" Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since Charlotte had known him, he looked genuinely uncertain. Charlotte dropped her bouquet. It hit the ground with a soft thud, white roses scattering across the grass. She reached out and took Ethan's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. He squeezed once, gently, and Charlotte felt something tight in her chest start to loosen. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." Ethan led her down the aisle, away from Nathan, away from the altar, away from the life she'd been about to lock herself into. Charlotte's dress was too long for running, so she grabbed handfuls of silk and lace and held them up as best she could. Behind them, the garden had erupted into chaos. Guests were shouting, asking what was happening, demanding explanations. Charlotte could hear her mother calling her name, could hear Nathan yelling something that got cut off abruptly. She didn't look back. They reached the helicopter. Ethan helped her in, then climbed in after her. His men were already inside. The pilot didn't wait for permission. The rotors sped up immediately, and the helicopter lifted smoothly off the ground. Charlotte caught one glimpse of the garden below, before they rose too high to see clearly. Nathan was standing at the altar, surrounded by confused guests, staring up at the helicopter with an expression of absolute rage. Her parents were together near the front row. Her mother looked devastated. Her father looked stunned. The whole beautiful setup she'd spent months planning was in ruins. Flowers scattered, chairs knocked over, the careful order completely destroyed. Then they were above the trees and the garden disappeared from view. Charlotte turned to look at Ethan. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not triumphant, not relieved. Something quieter. Something that looked almost like fear. "You okay?" he asked. Charlotte started laughing. She couldn't help it. The question was so absurd given everything that had just happened that laughter was the only possible response. It came out shaky and slightly hysterical, and once she started, she couldn't seem to stop. Ethan waited until she'd gotten control of herself. "That's not really an answer," he said quietly. "I just left my wedding in a helicopter," Charlotte said. "I have no idea if I'm okay. I have no idea what I am." "Fair enough." They sat in silence for a moment, the helicopter's engine loud enough that conversation required effort. Charlotte looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Actually, all of her was shaking. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "Somewhere safe, somewhere Nathan can't reach you." Ethan paused. "I have a place outside the city. Private. Secure. You can stay there as long as you need to." Charlotte nodded slowly. Then something occurred to her. "How did you know? About Nathan, I mean. About what he was doing to me." Ethan's expression went very carefully neutral. "We should probably talk about that later." "Ethan, Charlotte, How did you know? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I've been keeping tabs on you for a while now. Charlotte stared at him. What does that mean, keeping tabs? It means I made sure you were safe, that nothing bad happened to you, that no one— He stopped, clearly choosing his words carefully. That no one hurt you. For how long? Ethan looked away, out the helicopter window at the city passing below them. Since I left. The words hit Charlotte like a physical blow. Since you— Ethan, that was 7 years ago. I know. You've been watching me for 7 years? Not watching, just making sure you were okay. That's watching. Charlotte's voice was rising now, sharp with something between anger and hysteria. That's literally the definition of watching someone. You left without a word, without an explanation, without even a text to tell me you weren't dead in a ditch somewhere, and you've been watching me this whole time. I couldn't contact you, Ethan said, and now there was something raw in his voice. I wanted to, every single day I wanted to, but I couldn't. Why not? Because— He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture Charlotte recognized from 100 different moments years ago. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Charlotte was fully yelling now, not caring that Ethan's men were trying very hard to pretend they weren't listening. You show up at my wedding like something out of a movie. You crash the ceremony with a helicopter. You tell me you've been stalking me for 7 years. I wasn't stalking you. And then you say it's complicated? I left everything back there, Ethan. My family, my life, everything I know. The least you can do is tell me why you disappeared. The helicopter banked sharply, heading east. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and Charlotte saw a dozen different emotions cross his face. Then he sighed. When I left, he said slowly, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because staying would have gotten you killed. Charlotte went very still. What? After your father took me in, after I got clean and stable, I thought I'd left my mother's life behind. I thought all the people she'd been involved with, all the debts and the danger, I thought that had died with her. But it hadn't. 6 months after I moved in with your family, they found me. Who found you? People my mother owed money to. Bad people. The kind who don't forget debts and don't care who they hurt to collect. Ethan's jaw was tight. They told me I had 2 choices. I could work for them, do what they needed done, or they could hurt the people I cared about to motivate me. They had photos, Charlotte, of you, your parents, your friends. They knew where you went to school, where your dad worked, everything. Charlotte felt cold. So you left. So I left. I figured if I wasn't in your life, you weren't leverage, you were safe. He paused. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but I was right about that. They left you alone once I was gone. And you've been, what, working for them? For 7 years? For about 6 months. Then I got out. But getting out meant making sure I'd never be vulnerable again, making sure no one could ever use the people I cared about against me. Ethan looked at her directly now. I built something, Charlotte. Something big enough and strong enough that no one can threaten me anymore. And once I had that, I made sure you were protected too, whether you knew it or not. Charlotte's head was spinning. This was too much information, too many revelations all at once. Protected how? However you needed. Money when you needed it. I never got money from you. You got a scholarship for your senior year of college that didn't exist before and disappeared after you graduated. You got a job at a gallery that wasn't hiring until I made them hire you. You got an apartment in a safe building with security I vetted personally. Ethan's voice was quiet but steady. And when Nathan Calloway showed up in your life, I looked into him. When I found out what he was really like, I tried to get you evidence, anonymously. Charlotte's blood went cold. The photos. What photos? 3 weeks ago, someone sent me photos of Nathan with another woman and his child. Photos that showed me he'd been living a double life. That's when I confronted him, and he— She stopped, the memory of Nathan's threats flooding back. He told me he'd destroy my family if I didn't go through with the wedding. Ethan's expression went dark. I didn't know about the threats. If I'd known, you sent those photos. Yes. You've been manipulating my life for 7 years. I've been protecting you for 7 years. That's not the same thing. Charlotte was yelling again, but she didn't care. You don't get to make those decisions for me, Ethan. You don't get to decide what I know or don't know, who I date or don't date, where I work or where I live. That's not protection, that's control. I know. Ethan's voice was quiet. You're right. I know you're right. But Charlotte, I couldn't just let you get hurt. Not when I had the power to stop it. Even if it meant lying to me. I never lied to you. You disappeared. You let me think you were dead or that you didn't care or I don't even know what I thought. And all that time you were just watching, pulling strings, playing puppet master with my life. Charlotte could feel tears burning in her eyes now, hot and angry. I mourned you, Ethan. I spent months thinking something terrible had happened to you, and you were fine. You were just fine, and you couldn't be bothered to tell me. I'm sorry. The words were simple, raw. I'm so sorry, Charlotte, for all of it. For leaving, for not explaining, for handling this all wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought keeping you safe was more important than being honest. But I was wrong. The helicopter was descending now, heading toward what looked like a private landing pad on top of a building Charlotte didn't recognize. The city spread out below them, vast and impersonal and completely unaware that Charlotte's entire world had just been turned inside out. She looked at Ethan, this man who'd broken her heart and saved her life in the same breath, and tried to figure out what she felt. Anger, definitely. Betrayal, confusion, fear. But underneath all of that, buried deep but impossible to ignore, was the same thing she'd felt 7 years ago when he'd first kissed her in her parents' kitchen. Love. Stupid, stubborn, impossible to kill love. I can't do this right now, Charlotte said finally. I can't process any of this. I need time. I need to think. Take all the time you need, Ethan said quietly. I'm not going anywhere, not this time. The helicopter touched down with barely a bump. One of Ethan's men opened the door and helped Charlotte out onto the rooftop. The wind from the rotors made her wedding dress billow around her legs. A reminder that just an hour ago, she'd been standing at an altar about to marry someone else. Ethan led her to a door that opened into what looked like a penthouse apartment. It was sleek and modern and probably cost more than Charlotte would make in 10 years. She walked in, still in her wedding dress, still trying to catch up with everything that had happened in the last hour. There's a bedroom through there, Ethan said, pointing. Bathroom's attached. There should be clothes that fit. I had someone pick up some things. If you need anything else, just ask. Charlotte nodded numbly. Then a thought occurred to her. My parents, they're going to be terrified. I need to call them. Already handled. My people contacted them 10 minutes ago. Let them know you're safe. They're on their way here now if you want to see them. Of course they were. Because Ethan had thought of everything. Because Ethan always thought of everything. Charlotte felt like crying again, but she was too exhausted for tears. Okay, she said. Okay, I'm going to go change. Get out of this dress. She walked toward the bedroom, then stopped and turned back. Ethan was standing in the middle of his expensive apartment, watching her with an expression that looked lost and uncertain, and nothing like the dangerous man who'd crashed her wedding with a helicopter. Ethan, Charlotte said, that promise you made, on the rooftop, that if I ever needed you, you'd come. I remember. Did you mean it? Really mean it? Or was it just something you said because we were kids, and we thought that's what people in love said to each other? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. I meant it, he said quietly. I've meant it every day for the last 7 years. It's the only promise I've ever kept that mattered. Charlotte nodded slowly. Then she went into the bedroom and closed the door behind her. She made it about 3 steps before her legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, her ridiculous wedding dress pooling around her like a white silk puddle. She pulled her knees to her chest, pressed her face against them, and finally let herself fall apart. Charlotte sat on the bedroom floor for what might have been 5 minutes or 50. She'd lost all sense of time. The wedding dress felt like it was strangling her, all those layers of expensive silk and lace suddenly suffocating. She fumbled with the buttons running down her back, managed to get 3 undone before she gave up and just yanked the whole thing over her head, not caring when she heard something rip. The dress landed in a heap on the floor, and Charlotte left it there. Let it wrinkle. Let it get ruined. It didn't matter anymore. She found the clothes Ethan had mentioned in the closet, jeans, t-shirts, a sweatshirt, all in her size. Of course they were in her size. Ethan had probably known her measurements better than she did after 7 years of watching from whatever shadows he'd been hiding in. The thought should have creeped her out more than it did. But Charlotte was too wrung out to feel anything except exhausted. She pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, washed her face in the bathroom sink, and watched $700 worth of professional makeup swirl down the drain. Her reflection looked pale and raw, her eyes red from crying, her carefully styled hair already coming loose from its pins. She looked nothing like the bride who'd walked down that aisle an hour ago. She looked like herself again. Smaller, maybe. More fragile, but herself. There was a knock on the bedroom door. "Charlotte?" It was Ethan's voice, careful and quiet. "Your parents are here." Charlotte's stomach dropped. She'd been so caught up in her own spiral that she'd almost forgotten they were coming. What was she supposed to say to them? How was she supposed to explain any of this? "Give me a minute," she called back. She took 3 deep breaths, pulled her hair back into a messy ponytail, and opened the door. Her parents were standing in Ethan's living room, looking completely out of place among all the sleek modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. Her mother was still in her mother-of-the-bride dress, her father in his suit. They both looked shell-shocked. The second Charlotte walked out of the bedroom, her mother rushed toward her and pulled her into a hug so tight Charlotte could barely breathe. "Are you okay? Are you hurt? What happened?" "Charlotte, what?" "I'm fine, Mom. I'm okay." Charlotte hugged her back, feeling her mother shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her father joined the hug, wrapping both of them in his arms the way he used to when Charlotte was little and had nightmares. For a moment, Charlotte let herself feel safe. Let herself be a child again, protected by people who loved her and would fix everything. But that wasn't how this worked anymore. She wasn't a child, and her parents couldn't fix this. When they finally pulled apart, Charlotte saw Ethan standing across the room, keeping his distance. He looked uncertain in a way that didn't match the confidence he'd shown at the wedding, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be here for this moment. Charlotte's father noticed him too. He went very still, and Charlotte saw recognition flash across his face. "Ethan Hayes," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Mr. Bennett." Ethan's voice was respectful, but not apologetic. "It's been a long time." 7 years. Charlotte's father didn't move toward Ethan, didn't offer a handshake. "You left without saying goodbye, without telling anyone where you were going or why. We thought—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "We thought something had happened to you." "I know. I'm sorry. Sorry." Charlotte's father repeated the word like it was something bitter in his mouth. "You disappeared from my daughter's life, broke her heart, and now you show up in a helicopter and crash her wedding, and you're sorry?" "But Dad," Charlotte started, but her mother put a hand on her arm. "Let him talk," Rebecca said quietly. She was looking at Ethan with an expression Charlotte couldn't quite read. Not angry, not exactly. Something more complicated. "Let him explain." So Ethan explained. He told them about his mother's debts, about the people who'd found him, about the threats they'd made against Charlotte and her family. He told them about leaving to keep them safe, about the years he'd spent building something strong enough that no one could threaten him again. He left out some of the details. Charlotte noticed he didn't specify exactly what he'd built or how, but he told them enough. Charlotte's parents listened in silence. When Ethan finished, her father was quiet for a long moment. "You could have come to me," he said finally. "When those people threatened you, when they showed you those photos, you could have told me. We could have gone to the police. We could have—" "With respect, Mr. Bennett, the police couldn't have helped. These weren't people who worried about law enforcement. They owned half the precinct." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. Telling you would have just put you in danger too. Leaving was the only option that kept Charlotte safe. "And watching her for 7 years?" Charlotte's mother spoke up now. "Making decisions about her life without her knowledge? How was that keeping her safe?" "It wasn't just about keeping her safe anymore," Ethan admitted. "After a while, it was about, I needed to know she was okay. I needed to see that she was happy, that she was building a life. even if I couldn't be part of it. Except she wasn't happy, Rebecca said sharply. She was about to marry a man who was threatening her, who'd been lying to her for months. A man you apparently knew was dangerous. So what exactly were you protecting her from, Ethan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your protection didn't do much good. Ethan flinched, and Charlotte saw real pain cross his face. You're right. I should have done more. I should have contacted her directly when I found out about Nathan. Should have. I made a lot of mistakes. But I couldn't let her marry him. I couldn't stand by and watch that happen. Charlotte's father was studying Ethan with an intensity that made Charlotte nervous. She'd seen that look before, usually right before he made a decision about a business deal or a contractor he wasn't sure he could trust. What exactly have you built, Ethan? He asked. In the 7 years since you left, what did you become? Dad, I don't think... Charlotte tried to interrupt, but Ethan held up a hand. It's a fair question. He looked directly at Charlotte's father. I built a security company, started small, doing private protection for people who needed it, grew from there. Now I handle security consulting for corporations, high-profile individuals, government contracts. I'm not... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not involved in anything illegal. Everything I do is legitimate, board-approved, fully licensed. But I deal with dangerous situations and dangerous people. That's the work. And you're successful at it, Charlotte's father said. It wasn't a question. He'd already made the assessment, probably from the helicopter and the men and this apartment that screamed money and power. Yes. Successful enough to hire helicopters to crash weddings. That helicopter's mine. And yes, I would have spent every penny I have to get to Charlotte if she needed me. Charlotte's mother made a soft sound, something between a sigh and a laugh. You really meant it, didn't you? That promise you made her. On the rooftop. Ethan looked surprised. She told you about that? She told me everything about you, Ethan. After you left, she talked about you for months. About the promises you'd made, the plans you'd had, about how much it hurt when you disappeared. Rebecca's voice softened. She loved you, really loved you. Do you have any idea what it did to her when you vanished? I know. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. I know, and I'm sorry. If I could go back and do it differently? But you can't, Charlotte's father cut in. You can't go back. You can only go forward. So the question is, what happens now? You showed up, you stopped the wedding, you brought Charlotte here. What's your plan? Charlotte found her voice. I can speak for myself, Dad. I don't need Ethan to have a plan for me. I know that, sweetheart, but I'm not asking for you. I'm asking for me. Her father turned to face her fully. Because I need to know if I should be worried. I need to know if this man, he gestured at Ethan, is going to take care of you or if he's going to disappear again the next time things get hard. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan said firmly. Not unless Charlotte tells me to leave. And Nathan? Rebecca asked. He's not going to just accept this. He threatened Charlotte's entire family. What's stopping him from following through? Charlotte felt her stomach twist. In all the chaos, she'd almost forgotten about Nathan's threats, about the promises he'd made to destroy her father's business, her mother's community center, everyone she loved. Nathan Calloway won't be a problem, Ethan said, and there was something hard in his voice now. Not for Charlotte, not for any of you. How can you be sure? Charlotte asked. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Because I've spent the last 3 weeks gathering evidence against him. Every shady deal, every bribed official, every law he's bent or broken to get ahead. I have documentation of his relationship with Jennifer, proof he's been living a double life, financial records showing money laundering through his firm. I have enough to end his career and put him in prison. The room went silent. You've had this evidence for 3 weeks? Charlotte said slowly. Since I texted you? Since before that? Since I first looked into him and realized what kind of man he was. I started building a case against him months ago. Ethan paused. I was going to send it all to you anonymously, give you everything you needed to leave him safely. But then you sent that text, and I realized you needed more than evidence. You needed a way out that Nathan couldn't block. So you crashed my wedding. So I crashed your wedding. Charlotte didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're insane, you know that, right? Completely insane. Probably, Ethan admitted. But you're safe now. That's what matters. Charlotte's father was watching this exchange with an expression that was hard to read. Finally, he sighed and rubbed his face with both hands. I need a drink, he said. Ethan, do you have anything stronger than water in this place? Whiskey okay? Whiskey's perfect. Ethan moved to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of what looked like very expensive whiskey and 3 glasses. Charlotte's mother waved him off when he offered her one, but Charlotte took a glass and downed half of it in one swallow. It burned going down, but the warmth helped steady her. Her father took a smaller sip, then looked at Ethan over the rim of his glass. You love my daughter. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. Yes. And you're willing to do whatever it takes to keep her safe, even if it means making decisions she might hate you for. Yes. That's what I thought. Charlotte's father set down his glass. Here's the problem, Ethan. Charlotte doesn't need someone to keep her safe from a distance. She doesn't need someone making choices for her or controlling her life to protect her. She needs someone who trusts her enough to be honest, even when the truth is hard. Can you be that person? Ethan looked at Charlotte, really looked at her, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time in 7 years. I can try. Trying's not good enough, Charlotte said. Her voice came out harder than she'd intended, but she didn't soften it. Ethan, I can't be with someone who thinks they know better than me what's good for me. I can't be with someone who's going to make decisions about my life without including me. I did that with Nathan, and look how that turned out. I'm not Nathan. I know you're not, but you still lied to me. You still manipulated things behind the scenes, pulled strings, made choices that affected my entire life without telling me. That's not protection. That's control. And I won't accept it. Not from you, not from anyone. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this right, Charlotte. I spent so long thinking the only way to keep you safe was to stay away and handle everything myself. I don't know how to let someone in. I don't know how to share the burden instead of carrying it alone. Then learn, Charlotte said simply, because if you want to be in my life, that's what it's going to take. Full transparency, no more secrets, no more decisions made for me instead of with me. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. I'll take it, Ethan said immediately. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. Charlotte wanted to believe him. Part of her did believe him. But trust wasn't something you could just decide to give. It had to be earned, piece by piece, through actions and time and proof that someone meant what they said. We'll see, she said quietly. Her mother had been watching this exchange with sharp eyes. Now she spoke up. Charlotte, I think you should come home with us tonight. Get some distance. Think about what you want. Talk to people who aren't, she gestured vaguely at Ethan, emotionally complicated. Charlotte started to nod, then stopped. What about Nathan? What if he comes after you? Let him try, her father said grimly. I've been dealing with difficult men my whole career. I can handle Nathan Calloway. No, you can't, Ethan cut in. Not the way he fights, not when he's desperate. Nathan's going to be backed into a corner after what happened today, and cornered men do stupid, dangerous things. He looked at Charlotte's father directly. I meant what I said. I have enough evidence to destroy him, but it takes time to deploy it properly. Police investigations, media coordination, legal proceedings. It could be a few days before everything's in motion. Until then, Nathan's a threat. So what do you suggest? Rebecca asked. Stay here, all of you. This building has security Nathan can't get through. My people will make sure you're safe until Nathan's no longer a problem. Ethan paused. There's plenty of space, separate bedrooms, privacy, whatever you need. You don't have to trust me, but trust that I can keep you safe. That I will keep you safe. Charlotte's parents exchanged a look. One of those wordless conversations married couples could have with just their eyes. For tonight, her father said finally. We'll stay tonight. Tomorrow, we reassess. Ethan nodded. That's fair. He showed Charlotte's parents to guest rooms on the opposite side of the penthouse. Charlotte heard him explaining where everything was, how the security system worked, that his people were downstairs if they needed anything. His voice was patient and respectful, nothing like the dangerous man who'd threatened Nathan in the garden. When he came back, Charlotte was standing by the windows, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that felt wrong for how the day had gone. Beautiful things shouldn't happen on days like this. "You okay?" Ethan asked quietly. Charlotte laughed, sharp and bitter. "Everyone keeps asking me that. I don't know how to answer. Am I okay? I just left my wedding in a helicopter. My fiancé turned out to be a complete sociopath. The man I loved 7 years ago crashed back into my life and told me he's been watching me this whole time. My parents are sleeping in a strange apartment because it's not safe for them to go home. So no, Ethan, I'm not okay. I'm so far from okay I can't even see it from here. Fair enough?" Ethan moved to stand beside her at the window, careful to keep some distance between them. "For what it's worth, you handled today better than most people would have. You made a hard choice in front of everyone you know. That takes courage. Or insanity. Maybe both." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city lights begin to flicker on as darkness settled in. "The evidence against Nathan," Charlotte said finally. "What are you going to do with it?" "Oh, turn it over to the authorities, federal prosecutors, actually. Some of what he's been involved in crosses state lines, makes it a federal case. I've already got people coordinating with the FBI. They'll move on him tomorrow morning." "That fast?" "That fast. By this time tomorrow, Nathan Calloway's entire world will have collapsed. His law firm, his reputation, his freedom, all of it gone." Charlotte should have felt satisfaction at that. Should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. But mostly she just felt tired. And Jennifer, his son? Jennifer knew what she was doing. She was complicit in the fraud, helped him hide assets, participated in the money laundering. She'll face charges too. Ethan's voice softened slightly. "The kid's innocent in all this. I've made sure there's a trust set up for him, money for college, living expenses, therapy if he needs it. He won't pay for his parents' crimes." Of course Ethan had thought of that. Of course he'd made sure an innocent child wouldn't suffer. "You're a good person," Charlotte said quietly. "You know that? For all the lying and the secrets and the controlling behavior, underneath it all, you're still a good person." Ethan made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I'm really not. I've done things, Charlotte. Things that would make you look at me differently if you knew." "Then tell me. What?" Charlotte turned to face him fully. "You said no more secrets. That means you tell me the things that scare you, the things you think will make me run. You tell me, and you let me decide for myself whether I can live with them or not." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and Charlotte saw the war happening behind his eyes, the instinct to protect her from the ugly truth fighting against his promise to be honest. Finally he spoke. "When I left you, when I went to work for the people my mother owed money to, they didn't want me for construction work. They wanted me because I was smart and desperate and completely off the radar. No criminal record, no history, nothing that would flag me to law enforcement. What did they have you do?" "Courier work, mostly. Moving packages, delivering messages, nothing violent. But I knew what I was carrying. I knew the packages were drugs, knew the messages were coordinating deals that would destroy lives. I told myself I didn't have a choice, that I was just surviving. But that was a lie. I always had a choice. I chose to do it anyway." Charlotte's chest felt tight, but she kept her voice steady. "Keep going." "After 6 months, I had enough money saved to disappear. I used some of it to pay off my mother's debts, wipe the slate clean so they'd have no reason to come after me or you. Used the rest to start the security company. But starting a business requires licenses, permits, background checks. I had connections by then, people who owed me favors, people who could make paperwork disappear or appear as needed. I used those connections, built the business on a foundation that wasn't entirely clean. Is it clean now? Yes, everything I do now is legitimate, but it took me 2 years to get there. And those 2 years included bribing officials, falsifying documents, and working with people I knew were criminals." Ethan's voice was flat, factual. "I'm not proud of it, but I'd do it again if it meant getting to a place where I could protect you properly." Charlotte processed this slowly. Part of her wanted to be horrified, wanted to tell him that justified nothing, that he'd compromised himself for no good reason. But another part of her, the part that had spent the last 3 weeks being blackmailed by Nathan Calloway, understood exactly why someone would make those choices. "You could have told me this before," she said, 7 years ago. "You could have explained what was happening and let me help you figure out another way." "I was 23 years old and terrified," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't know how to ask for help. I barely knew how to accept love. All I knew was that people I cared about kept getting hurt because of me, and I had to make it stop. So you left. So I left." Charlotte turned back to the window. The city looked peaceful from up here, all the chaos and danger hidden by distance and darkness. "I want to hate you for that. Part of me does hate you for that. I know, but part of me understands it too, and I don't know what to do with that." Ethan didn't say anything. He just stood there waiting. Charlotte appreciated that about him. He didn't try to fill silences with empty words or false comfort. He just let the moment be what it was. "I need time," Charlotte said finally, "to process all of this, to figure out what I want and who I can trust and everything. I can't make any decisions right now. I'm too overwhelmed. Take all the time you need. And you need to follow through on what you said. No more secrets, no more decisions made without me. If you're going to do something that affects my life, I need to know about it. Before it happens, not after. I will. I promise." Charlotte looked at him, this man who'd kept one promise so completely that it had shaped 7 years of both their lives. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Ethan. I'd rather have honesty than false hope." "It's not false hope. I mean it." Ethan met her eyes steadily. "I know I have to earn your trust back. I know that's going to take time, maybe a lot of time, but I'm willing to put in the work for as long as it takes." Charlotte wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it made her chest ache, but wanting something didn't make it true. "We'll see," she said again. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd somehow managed to keep it through the entire helicopter escape. She pulled it out and saw a flood of messages. Friends asking what had happened, cousins demanding explanations, colleagues from the gallery wanting to know if she was okay, and one message from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it and felt her blood go cold. "You made a very big mistake today, Charlotte. You and your helicopter boyfriend are going to regret embarrassing me like that. I promise you that." It was from Nathan. It had to be. Charlotte showed the message to Ethan. His expression went dark and dangerous in a way that reminded Charlotte that he wasn't just the wounded boy she'd loved anymore. He was someone else now, someone harder. "Block the number," he said quietly. "Don't respond. I'll handle it." "How?" "Let me make some calls. The timeline on Nathan's arrest just got moved up." Ethan pulled out his own phone. "Excuse me for a minute." He walked away, already dialing, his voice dropping into tones too quiet for Charlotte to hear. She watched him pace by the windows, gesturing occasionally, his whole body language shifting into something sharp and focused. Charlotte looked back down at Nathan's message. 24 hours ago, that message would have terrified her. It would have sent her spiraling into panic about what he could do, who he could hurt, how much power he had to destroy her life. But now, standing in Ethan's apartment with her parents safe, and Ethan making calls to dismantle Nathan's entire existence, she felt something different. Not fear, anger, pure, clean anger at a man who thought he could threaten her, control her, use her as a prop in his perfect life. Nathan Calloway had made a very big mistake when he'd threatened Charlotte Bennett. He'd pushed her into a corner and she'd found a way out. Now he was going to pay for that. Ethan came back a few minutes later. "It's done. FBI's moving on Nathan tonight instead of tomorrow morning. They'll pick him up within the hour. He won't have time to follow through on whatever he's planning." "That fast?" "I called in some favors, made it clear this was urgent." Ethan paused. "He's not going to hurt you, Charlotte. I won't let him." There it was again, that protective instinct that was simultaneously touching and frustrating. Charlotte took a breath and made herself say what needed to be said. "I appreciate that. But Ethan, you need to understand something. I don't want you to protect me from everything. I don't want to be sheltered or kept safe in a bubble. What I want is to be strong enough to handle things myself, with you as a partner, not a bodyguard." Can you do that? Ethan considered this. I can try. It's not going to be easy for me. My first instinct is always going to be to step in, to handle things before they get to you. But I'll try to check that instinct, to ask you what you want instead of assuming I know better. That's all I'm asking. Just try. Ethan nodded slowly, then carefully, like he was afraid she might bolt. He reached out and took her hand. Charlotte let him. His hand was warm and calloused and familiar in a way that made her throat tight. We're going to figure this out, he said quietly. I don't know how yet, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to figure it out. Charlotte wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe they could find their way back to each other, could build something real out of the wreckage of broken promises and 7 years of silence. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it happen. Maybe, she said. We'll see. It was the best she could offer. For now, it would have to be enough. Charlotte barely slept that night. She lay in the guest bedroom staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying everything that had happened in an endless loop. The wedding, the helicopter, Nathan's message, Ethan's confessions. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nathan's face at the altar, twisted with rage and disbelief. Saw Ethan walking toward her like something out of a fever dream. Saw her own hand reaching out to take his, choosing chaos over the illusion of safety. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep entirely and padded out to the kitchen in bare feet and borrowed pajamas. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights filtering through the massive windows. Charlotte was halfway to the refrigerator when she realized she wasn't alone. Ethan was sitting on the couch in the living room, his laptop open on the coffee table in front of him, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. He looked up when she entered, and Charlotte saw the exhaustion around his eyes. Couldn't sleep either? He asked quietly. Too much in my head. Charlotte moved to the kitchen and found a glass, filled it with water from the tap. What are you doing up? Monitoring the situation with Nathan, making sure everything's proceeding as planned. Charlotte carried her water over and sat on the opposite end of the couch, curling her legs under her. And is it? Proceeding as planned? Ethan turned the laptop so she could see the screen. It showed what looked like a news feed, multiple windows open with different headlines. Charlotte leaned forward and read them, her eyes widening with each one. Chicago attorney Nathan Calloway arrested on federal fraud charges. Morrison and Hale partner accused of money laundering scheme. Prominent lawyer faces multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy. That was fast, Charlotte said, her voice coming out shakier than she'd intended. I told you. I had everything ready to go. It was just a matter of pulling the trigger. Ethan closed the laptop. He's in federal custody right now. No bail. The prosecutors argued he was a flight risk. Jennifer's being questioned as a potential co-conspirator. Morrison and Hale released a statement an hour ago saying they're cooperating fully with the investigation and have placed Nathan on immediate suspension pending the outcome. Charlotte should have felt relieved, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt numb. His son, Michael, what's going to happen to him? Jennifer's parents are taking him. They live in Wisconsin, they're clean, and they've already agreed to let the trust I set up cover his expenses. Ethan paused. He's going to be okay, Charlotte. As okay as a kid can be when his parents are both facing federal charges. Charlotte took a long drink of water, trying to process this. 24 hours ago, she'd been preparing to marry Nathan Calloway. Now he was in a federal holding cell, and his entire life was burning down around him. The speed of it was dizzying. How much of this did you plan? She asked. Be honest. How long have you been setting this up? Ethan looked at her for a long moment, clearly weighing how much to tell her. Then he sighed. I started looking into Nathan about 8 months ago. The moment he proposed to you and I saw the announcement in the paper. I wanted to know who he was, whether he was good enough for you. And when you found out he wasn't, I started digging deeper, found the connection to Jennifer within a few weeks. The money laundering took longer. Nathan was careful, used shell companies and offshore accounts, but he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. Once I knew where to look, it all unraveled pretty quickly. Charlotte set down her water glass, her hand shaking slightly. So you've known for months. Known that Nathan was a fraud, that he had another family, that he was involved in criminal activity. And you didn't tell me. I sent you those photos. Anonymously. You sent me anonymous photos like I was some kind of investigation subject, not a person you supposedly cared about. Charlotte's voice was rising now, and she made herself lower it, aware that her parents were sleeping down the hall. You could have come to me, could have told me yourself, could have given me the truth instead of just pieces of it. I know. Ethan's voice was quiet, steady. You're right. I should have. I was afraid. Of what? That I wouldn't believe you? That seeing me again would hurt you more than staying with Nathan? That you'd moved on and built a life and I had no right to blow it up just because I couldn't handle watching you marry someone else? He paused. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting myself from the possibility that you'd tell me to leave and never come back. Charlotte looked at him, this man who'd orchestrated an entire takedown of Nathan Calloway, but couldn't bring himself to knock on her door and talk to her like a normal person. It would have been funny if it wasn't so painfully sad. I spent 7 years convincing myself I was over you, she said quietly. 7 years building walls and telling myself that what we had was just young love, that it wasn't real or lasting or worth holding on to. And I almost believed it. Almost convinced myself that marrying Nathan was the right choice, the safe choice, the grown-up choice. Charlotte, let me finish. She held up a hand. Then you showed up yesterday and all those walls just collapsed, like they'd never existed at all, and I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to trust you when you've been lying to me for 7 years, even if the lies were meant to protect me. I don't know how to let you back into my life when I spent so long learning to live without you. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I don't expect you to trust me. Not right away. I know I have to earn that back. But Charlotte, I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Everything I did, every choice I made, it was all about keeping you safe and keeping you happy, even if I couldn't be the one making you happy. That's not love, Ethan. That's obsession. The word hung in the air between them, harsh and true. Ethan flinched like she'd slapped him. Maybe, he admitted. Maybe it was. Maybe I crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed, but I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to be honest with you now, even when it's hard. Even when it makes me look like exactly the kind of person you shouldn't trust. Charlotte pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. She felt raw and exposed and so tired she could barely think straight. I don't know what I want from you. I don't know what we're doing here. We're talking. That's a start. Is it? Or are we just circling each other, waiting for the other person to make the first move? Ethan shifted on the couch, angling himself to face her more directly. What do you need from me, Charlotte? Right now, in this moment. What would help? Charlotte thought about it. What did she need? Safety? But she had that now. Nathan was in custody. Her parents were here. Ethan had made it clear he'd burn down the world before he let anything happen to her. Truth. But Ethan had given her that too, ugly and uncomfortable as it was. So what was left? I need to know why, she said finally. Not why you left, you've explained that, but why you came back. And don't tell me it's because I texted you. You could have ignored that message. You could have sent someone else to help me, could have handled the Nathan situation from a distance without ever showing your face. But you came yourself. You crashed my wedding in a helicopter and told everyone there that I belonged with you. Why? Ethan was quiet for so long Charlotte thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I'm selfish. Because I told myself for 7 years that staying away was the right thing, the noble thing, the thing that would keep you safe and let you be happy. But when you reached out, when you asked me to come get you, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep lying to myself that I was staying away for your benefit. I was staying away because I was a coward. Because I was afraid that if I came back, you'd look at me and see a stranger. See someone who'd hurt you and didn't deserve a second chance. And yesterday, when you came anyway? Yesterday I decided I'd rather be honest about being selfish than noble about being a coward. I'd rather show up and have you hate me for it than spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd just been brave enough to try." Ethan looked at her directly now, his eyes dark and intense. "I love you, Charlotte. I never stopped. And maybe that makes me obsessive. Maybe it makes me a stalker. Maybe it makes me exactly the kind of person you should run from. But it's the truth. And you asked for truth, so there it is." Charlotte felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to cry again. She'd cried enough in the last 24 hours to last a lifetime. "I don't know if love is enough," she said quietly. "My parents love each other, and they make it work because they trust each other. They're honest with each other. They make decisions together. Can you do that? Can you really let me in, or are you always going to be making plans behind my back because you think you know better?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I want to say yes. I want to promise you that I'll never make another decision without talking to you first. But I don't know if I can keep that promise. My instincts are all wrong when it comes to you. I see a threat, and I want to eliminate it before you even know it exists. I see you in pain, and I want to fix it before you can ask for help. That's how I'm wired." Charlotte appreciated the honesty even as it made her heart sink. "Then maybe we can't do this. Maybe the gap between who you are and who I need you to be is too wide to cross." "Maybe," Ethan agreed. "Or maybe we figure it out together. Maybe you teach me how to check those instincts, how to pause and ask instead of just acting. And maybe I teach you that it's okay to let someone help carry the weight sometimes, that accepting support isn't the same as giving up control." It was a prettier picture than Charlotte had expected. A version where they both changed, both grew, both met somewhere in the middle. But life wasn't a movie. People didn't just magically fix their fundamental incompatibilities through the power of love and good intentions. "I need time," Charlotte said again. It seemed to be her refrain lately. "I need to figure out who I am outside of Nathan's manipulation and your protection. I need to stand on my own for a while." "I understand." "Do you? Because it might be a long while, Ethan. It might be months. It might be longer. And I can't promise that at the end of it, I'll be ready to let you back in." "I'll wait," Ethan said simply, "however long it takes." Charlotte wanted to tell him not to wait, that he should move on and find someone easier to love, someone who didn't come with 7 years of baggage and trust issues. But that felt cruel, and she was too tired for cruelty. "Okay," she said instead. "Okay." They sat in silence for a while, the city lights painting shadows across the living room. Charlotte found herself studying Ethan's profile, cataloging the ways he'd changed. The new scars, the harder edges, the way he held himself like someone who'd learned to expect danger from every direction. But underneath all that, she could still see traces of the boy she'd loved, the one who'd looked at her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Sure." "When you walked down that aisle yesterday, before I showed up, were you really going to go through with it? Were you going to marry him?" Charlotte considered lying, considered telling Ethan that yes, she'd been planning to marry Nathan, that she'd only stopped because Ethan had given her another option. But she'd asked for honesty, which meant she owed it in return. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was going through the motions, saying the words, but I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body, like none of it was real. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, I remember hoping that someone would, that something would happen to stop it. Then I heard the helicopter, and I saw you, and it was like what? Like the universe was giving me permission to save myself." Charlotte laughed shakily. "That sounds stupid." "It doesn't sound stupid." "Yes, it does. I'm a grown woman. I shouldn't need permission from the universe or a dramatic helicopter rescue to make my own choices. I should have just called off the wedding myself, told Nathan to go to hell, dealt with the consequences like an adult." "You were being threatened by someone who had the power to destroy your family," Ethan pointed out. "That's not a situation where calling it off was safe or simple." "But that's exactly my point. I let myself get into that situation in the first place. I ignored the red flags with Nathan because I was so focused on finding something stable and safe. I convinced myself that what I felt for him was enough, that I didn't need the kind of love I had with you because that kind of love was just a fairy tale anyway." Charlotte shook her head. I was lying to myself long before Nathan started lying to me. We all lie to ourselves sometimes. It's how we get through the day. That's depressing. Maybe, but it's also true. Charlotte couldn't argue with that. She finished her water and set the glass on the coffee table. I should try to sleep. My mom's going to want to talk in the morning, and I need to be at least halfway coherent for that conversation. Yeah, good idea. Ethan closed his laptop and stood up. Charlotte? Yeah, Ika? Thank you for giving me a chance to explain, for not telling me to leave and never come back. I'm still mad at you, Charlotte said. Just so we're clear. I'm still hurt and confused, and I don't know if I can trust you again. This isn't forgiveness. I know, but it's not complete rejection either. I'll take it. Charlotte stood up too, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the coffee table. Then, on impulse, Charlotte closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around Ethan in a hug. He went very still, like he was afraid to move and break the moment. Then slowly, carefully, his arms came up to return the embrace. He held her gently, like she was something precious and breakable. Charlotte let herself have this, just for a moment. Let herself remember what it felt like to be held by someone who knew all her sharp edges and chose to hold on anyway. Then she pulled back, stepped away, put the safe distance back between them. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Charlotte. She went back to the guest bedroom and climbed into bed, and this time, finally, she slept. When Charlotte woke up, sunlight was streaming through the windows and she could smell coffee brewing. She checked her phone, 9:30 in the morning. She'd slept for 6 hours, which felt like a miracle given everything. There were more messages, friends, colleagues, distant relatives who'd heard about the wedding disaster and wanted details. Charlotte ignored all of them and padded out to the kitchen. Her mother was already up, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and her phone. She looked up when Charlotte entered, and Charlotte saw the worry lines around her eyes. Morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. You? About the same. Rebecca poured Charlotte a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. Your father's still asleep. Ethan went out about an hour ago. Something about meetings he couldn't reschedule. Charlotte wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to hold on to. Did he say when he'd be back? This afternoon. Her mother studied her carefully. Do you want him to come back? Because if you need space, if you want us to go somewhere else... I don't know what I want, Charlotte interrupted. Everyone keeps asking me that, and I don't have an answer. I don't know if I want Ethan here or gone. I don't know if I'm relieved Nathan's arrested or if I'm worried about what comes next. I don't know anything except that I need coffee and probably food and maybe a shower that lasts about 3 hours. Rebecca smiled slightly. I can help with at least 2 of those things. Showers on you. She moved to the refrigerator and started pulling out ingredients. Within minutes, she was cooking. Eggs, toast, the way she always did when she was worried and needed something to do with her hands. Charlotte watched her work, feeling a wave of love and gratitude so strong it made her throat tight. Mom? Thank you for not asking me to explain everything, for not demanding to know why I left Nathan at the altar or what's happening with Ethan. Just thank you. Rebecca looked up from the eggs. Honey, you're my daughter. When you're ready to talk, you'll talk. Until then, I'm just here to make sure you eat and sleep and don't fall apart completely. I might fall apart anyway. Then I'll be here for that too. Charlotte felt tears threatening again. I really messed this up, didn't I? The wedding, Nathan. Everything. I made such a mess. You got yourself out of a dangerous situation, Rebecca corrected firmly. You made a choice to save yourself instead of going through with something that would have destroyed you. That's not a mess. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like chaos. Sometimes courage is chaotic. Sometimes it's messy and loud and nothing like what you see in movies. Rebecca slid a plate of eggs and toast across the counter. Eat, then we'll talk about what happens next. Charlotte ate mechanically, not really tasting the food, but knowing her mother wouldn't let the conversation continue until she'd finished. When the plate was empty, she pushed it aside and met her mother's eyes. Nathan's been arrested. Ethan said he's facing federal charges, no bail. Rebecca nodded slowly. I saw the news this morning. They're calling it one of the biggest fraud cases in Chicago this year. Ethan built the entire case against him, had evidence ready to go, just waiting for the right moment to deploy it. And you're worried about what that means, about what kind of person does that. Charlotte let out a shaky laugh. Am I that transparent? You're my daughter. I know how you think. Rebecca took a sip of her coffee. You're wondering if Ethan's any different from Nathan, if controlling your life from the shadows is really any better than Nathan's threats. Isn't it the same thing, both of them making decisions about my life without asking me first? No, Rebecca said firmly. It's not the same thing at all. Nathan threatened you to force you into marriage. He used your love for your family as a weapon against you. Ethan gathered evidence against someone who was hurting you and gave you an out when you asked for one. The methods might look similar from the outside, but the intentions are completely different. But Ethan's been watching me for 7 years, Mom, manipulating things behind the scenes, making decisions about my life. Making sure you were safe, Rebecca interrupted. Making sure you had opportunities. That's not the same as control, Charlotte. She paused, choosing her words carefully. That's love expressed by someone who doesn't know how to express it in healthy ways. Which isn't great, don't get me wrong. It's something he needs to work on. But it's not the same as what Nathan did. Charlotte wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words because her mother was right. There was a difference between Ethan's misguided protection and Nathan's calculated threats. Understanding that difference didn't mean she had to accept Ethan's behavior, but it did mean she couldn't just lump them together as the same kind of wrong. I don't know if I can be with someone like that, Charlotte said quietly. Someone who thinks protecting me means lying to me. Then don't be with him, not until he proves he can do better. Rebecca reached across the counter and took Charlotte's hand. But honey, don't throw away something real just because it's complicated. Your father and I have been married for 30 years, and I can tell you right now, love is always complicated. People are always flawed. The question isn't whether someone is perfect. The question is whether they're willing to work on their flaws, whether they're willing to grow and change and be better for you. And you think Ethan is? I think he showed up in a helicopter to save you from a marriage that would have destroyed you. I think he spent 7 years making sure you were safe, even though it must have killed him to stay away. I think he's trying, in his own broken way, to do right by you. Rebecca squeezed Charlotte's hand. But what I think doesn't matter. What matters is what you think, what you need, what you're willing to accept in a relationship. Charlotte closed her eyes, letting her mother's words sink in. What did she need? What was she willing to accept? She'd thought she knew the answers to those questions when she'd agreed to marry Nathan. She'd been so wrong. I need time, she said for what felt like the 100th time. I need to figure myself out before I can figure out what I want from someone else. Then take time. Take as much as you need. And if Ethan gets tired of waiting, if he moves on, then he wasn't the right person for you anyway. Rebecca's voice was gentle but firm. Charlotte, you can't build a life on fear that someone will leave. You have to build it on knowing that you'll be okay either way, with them or without them. Charlotte opened her eyes and looked at her mother. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You just weren't ready to hear it until now. They sat together in comfortable silence while Charlotte finished her coffee. Then Charlotte's father emerged from the guest room, looking rumpled and confused. What time is it? He asked, running a hand through his hair. Almost 10, Rebecca said. Coffee's fresh. Someone want to explain why we're in what looks like a millionaire's apartment instead of at home? He looked around, taking in the expensive furniture and the view. Also, where's Ethan? Out at meetings, Charlotte supplied. And we're here because it's safer than home while the situation gets sorted out. Her father poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. I saw the news. Nathan's been arrested. Federal charges. They're saying it's a major case. It is, Charlotte confirmed. Ethan had evidence, lots of it. He turned it all over to prosecutors. Her father was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then he looked at Charlotte directly. And how do you feel about that? I don't know, Dad. I'm glad Nathan's not a threat anymore. I'm relieved I don't have to worry about him following through on his threats. But I'm processing the fact that Ethan had all this information and didn't tell me until I specifically asked. Fair enough. Her father took a long sip of coffee. You know what I think? What? I think you need to get out of this apartment. Get some air, clear your head. Sitting around waiting for something to happen isn't going to help you figure out what you want. Rebecca nodded. Your father's right. Let's go home. Get you some of your own clothes, your own things. Being in a strange place isn't helping. But Ethan said Nathan was arrested and in federal custody, her father interrupted, which means he's not a threat anymore. We don't need to hide out like we're in witness protection. Charlotte felt a flutter of anxiety. Are you sure it's safe? I'm sure sitting here wondering if it's safe is driving you crazy. Her father set down his coffee mug. Come on, we'll swing by your apartment first, get you packed properly. Then you can stay with us for a few days while you figure out your next move. It felt too simple, too normal. But maybe that was exactly what Charlotte needed, a return to normal, even if just for a few hours. Okay, she said. Let me get dressed. We can go. 20 minutes later, they were in her father's car heading back toward Charlotte's apartment. The city looked the same as always. Busy streets, crowds of people, life continuing on like Charlotte's world hadn't just been turned upside down. It was disorienting how normal everything seemed. When they pulled up to Charlotte's building, she felt a wave of relief at seeing something familiar. Her apartment, her space, her things. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, and for the first time since the wedding, she felt like she could breathe properly. Her mother immediately started making tea while her father checked the windows and doors, his protective instincts kicking in. Charlotte went to her bedroom and started pulling clothes from the closet, packing a bag with actual clothes instead of the borrowed things from Ethan's place. She was halfway through packing when her phone rang. Unknown number. Charlotte almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Charlotte Bennett? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Yes. Who's this? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm an investigative reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I'm working on a story about Nathan Calloway's arrest, and I was hoping you might be willing to comment on your relationship with him. Charlotte's stomach dropped. How did you get this number? You're listed as Nathan Calloway's fiancé in multiple public records and social media posts. I'm reaching out to everyone who knew him professionally or personally. I understand you were supposed to marry him yesterday before the ceremony was interrupted. I have no comment, Charlotte said firmly. I understand this must be a difficult time, but the public has a right to know. The public has no right to anything about my personal life. Charlotte's voice was harder now. I'm not commenting on Nathan, on the wedding, or on anything else. Please don't call this number again. She hung up before the reporter could respond and stood there shaking. This was just the beginning, wasn't it? The reporters, the questions, the speculation. Her private disaster was about to become public entertainment. Her phone rang again immediately. Another unknown number. Charlotte let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. Charlotte? Her mother appeared in the doorway. Who keeps calling? Reporters. They want to talk about Nathan, about the wedding. Charlotte felt panic rising in her chest. Mom, this is going to be everywhere. Everyone's going to know. They're going to have questions and opinions, and, hey, look at me. Rebecca moved to Charlotte and took her shoulders firmly. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Not the reporters, not the guests from yesterday, not anyone. What happened between you and Nathan is your business. You tell people what you want to tell them, when you want to tell them, and everyone else can mind their own business. Charlotte nodded, trying to slow her breathing. Her phone buzzed with a text, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. She looked down at the screen and felt her blood run cold. They were all from numbers she didn't recognize, but the messages were variations on the same theme. Is it true you left Nathan Calloway at the altar? Did you know he was going to be arrested? Sources say you left with another man. Can you confirm? Were you involved in Nathan's fraud scheme? That last one made Charlotte want to throw her phone across the room. How dare they? How dare they suggest she'd been involved in Nathan's crimes when she'd been one of his victims? Another call came through. This time Charlotte recognized the number. It was from the gallery where she worked. She answered. Charlotte, it's Margaret. Her boss's voice was strained. I need you to not come in for a few days. What? Why? We've had reporters calling all morning asking about you and Nathan Calloway. It's causing a disruption. I think it's best if you take some personal time until this all blows over. Charlotte felt like she'd been punched. You're suspending me. I'm giving you time off, paid time off. It's for the best, Charlotte, for everyone. I see. Charlotte's voice came out flat. How much time? Let's say 2 weeks. We'll reassess then. Translation. We're distancing ourselves from you until we know whether this scandal is going to stick. Fine, Charlotte said. 2 weeks. She hung up and looked at her mother. I just got suspended from work because reporters won't stop calling them about Nathan. Rebecca's expression went dark. They can't do that. They can, and they did. Charlotte felt numb. And honestly, I don't blame them. Why would they want the drama? Because you're innocent. You didn't do anything wrong. I was engaged to a man who's been arrested on federal fraud charges. That's enough to make me toxic by association. Charlotte sat down on her bed, her half-packed bag forgotten. This is my life now, isn't it? People assuming I'm guilty just because I was with Nathan. People asking questions I can't answer because I don't know the answers myself. Her phone kept buzzing. More texts, more calls, more people wanting pieces of her story. Charlotte turned it off completely and dropped it on the bed. I can't do this, she said quietly. I can't face this right now. Her father had appeared in the doorway at some point during the conversation. Now he spoke up, his voice calm and decisive. Then we go back to Ethan's place, at least until the media frenzy dies down. You don't have to face anything you're not ready for. Charlotte wanted to argue, wanted to say she could handle it, that she didn't need to hide. But the truth was she couldn't handle it. Not yet. The walls were closing in and she needed space to breathe. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's go back. They drove back to Ethan's penthouse in silence. Charlotte squeezed between her parents in the back seat, like a child being protected from a storm. Her phone was still off, still buried in her purse, but she could feel its weight like an anchor. All those messages, all those questions, all those people who thought they had a right to dissect her life for entertainment. When they arrived, Ethan was already there, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when they entered, his expression shifting from business to concern in the space of a heartbeat. He ended the call immediately. What happened? He asked, his eyes on Charlotte. Reporters, her father said shortly. They got Charlotte's number somehow. Her work suspended her. We thought it was better to come back here. Ethan's jaw tightened. I should have anticipated that. Should have had your number changed, put protections in place. Stop, Charlotte interrupted. Her voice came out sharper than she'd intended, but she was too drained to soften it. Just stop trying to fix everything. This isn't something you can fix by making phone calls or gathering evidence. This is just what happens when you're associated with someone like Nathan. There's no protection from it, except time. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but he caught himself. Charlotte saw the effort it took him to step back, to not immediately launch into solution mode. It was a small thing, but she appreciated it. Okay, he said quietly. What do you need? I need to not exist for a while. I need everyone to forget about me until this blows over. I can help with that. I have a place upstate, completely private. No one knows about it except my security team. You could stay there as long as you need. No reporters, no questions. Charlotte almost said yes. Go, kashaso. Charlotte almost. The idea of disappearing into the woods or the mountains or wherever this mysterious upstate property was sounded perfect. But then she caught herself. Running away wouldn't solve anything. It would just delay the inevitable moment when she had to face reality. No, she said. Thank you, but no. I can't keep hiding. I have to figure out how to deal with this. Her mother touched her arm gently. You don't have to deal with it alone, honey. I know, but I also can't let other people fight my battles for me anymore. That's what got me into this mess in the first place. Charlotte looked at Ethan. I let Nathan make decisions for me because I thought he knew better. I let you watch over me from the shadows because I didn't even know it was happening. I need to start making my own choices, even if they're hard ones. Ethan nodded slowly. What's the first choice? Charlotte thought about it. What did she actually want? What did she need to do to start putting her life back together on her own terms? I want to talk to a lawyer, she said, not one of Nathan's colleagues, someone independent. I need to know what my legal exposure is, whether there's any chance I could be implicated in his crimes. I need to understand what I'm actually facing instead of just being afraid of shadows. I know someone, Ethan started, but Charlotte held up a hand. Not someone you know, someone I find myself. I need to do this on my own. She could see the frustration in Ethan's expression, the instinct to help warring with his promise to let her make her own choices. Finally, he just said, "Okay." Charlotte's father spoke up. "I'll help you find someone. We can look together, research firms, make calls, but you make the final decision on who to hire." That felt like a fair compromise. Charlotte nodded. "Thank you." The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Charlotte stayed at the penthouse, but she spent most of her time on her laptop researching lawyers and reading everything she could find about Nathan's case. The media coverage was extensive and brutal. Nathan's arrest had opened a floodgate. Former clients coming forward with complaints, colleagues sharing stories about suspicious behavior, journalists digging up every questionable decision he'd made in his career. Jennifer had been arrested as well, charged as a co-conspirator in the money laundering scheme. The photos of her being led out of her house in handcuffs had made the front page of every major paper. Charlotte felt a complicated mix of emotions seeing them, satisfaction that Jennifer was facing consequences, but also a strange pity for Michael, that little boy who'd just lost both his parents to their own greed. Charlotte's name came up occasionally in the coverage, but mostly in passing. Calloway's fiancé, Charlotte Bennett, left him at the altar the day before his arrest. Or sources close to the investigation say Bennett was unaware of Calloway's criminal activities. No one seemed to think she'd been involved, which was a relief. But that didn't stop people from having opinions. Her social media was flooded with messages. Some were supportive, people telling her she'd dodged a bullet. Others were cruel, calling her naive or stupid for not seeing what Nathan was. Charlotte deleted all the apps from her phone after the first day and decided to exist offline for a while. She found a lawyer eventually, a woman named Patricia Morris who specialized in white-collar crime and had a reputation for being both brilliant and completely disinterested in media attention. Patricia reviewed everything Charlotte knew about Nathan's activities and delivered her assessment in a calm, matter-of-fact voice that made Charlotte want to cry with relief. "You're clean," Patricia said during their second meeting. "The prosecutors might want to interview you as a witness, but there's nothing in Nathan's dealings that implicates you in any way. You were kept deliberately separate from his criminal enterprises. If anything, you were another victim." Charlotte had walked out of that meeting feeling like she could breathe properly for the first time in days. She wasn't going to be charged. She wasn't going to be dragged into legal proceedings as anything other than a witness. Nathan had used her, but he hadn't made her complicit. That night, she told Ethan she wanted to talk. Really talk. Not just the careful conversations they'd been having where both of them danced around the real issues. They sat on the penthouse balcony, the city spread out below them like a sea of lights. Charlotte had a glass of wine she wasn't drinking, just holding for something to do with her hands. "I've been thinking," she started, "about what you said. About wanting to be in my life, but not knowing how to do it right." Ethan waited, not interrupting. "I don't think I'm ready for a relationship. Not with you, not with anyone. I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by the man I'm with." Charlotte took a breath. "But I don't want you out of my life completely either. I just need you to be different, less protective, more honest, more of a partner than a guardian." "I can do that," Ethan said, "or I can try to do that. It's going to be a learning curve. For both of us." Charlotte finally took a sip of her wine. "I need to learn how to ask for help instead of waiting for someone to save me. You need to learn how to offer help without taking over. Maybe we can figure it out together." "What does that look like practically?" "I don't know yet. Maybe we start with friendship, with actually getting to know each other again. Not the people we were 7 years ago, but who we are now. No expectations beyond that." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "And if friendship is all it ever becomes? If you decide that's all you want from me? Then that's what it is," Charlotte said simply. "I can't promise you more than that right now. I can't promise you anything except that I'll be honest with you about what I'm feeling and what I need. That's more than I deserve." Ethan said quietly. After everything. That's more than I have any right to ask for. Maybe, but it's what I'm offering. Take it or leave it. I'll take it. Ethan looked at her directly. Whatever you're willing to give, I'll take it, and I'll work on earning more. Charlotte nodded, feeling something settle in her chest. It wasn't a perfect solution. It didn't tie up all the loose ends or guarantee a happy ending. But it felt honest. And honest was what she needed right now. 2 weeks after the wedding, that never happened, Charlotte moved back into her own apartment. Her parents had wanted her to stay with them, and Ethan had offered to extend his hospitality indefinitely, but Charlotte needed her own space. She needed to prove to herself that she could stand on her own. The gallery called and asked her to come back to work. Apparently, the media storm had died down enough that they felt comfortable having her around again. Charlotte almost told them where they could shove their job, but she needed the income and the routine, so she swallowed her pride and went back. It was awkward at first. Coworkers didn't know what to say to her, oscillating between overly careful politeness and obvious curiosity. But Charlotte held her head high and did her work and refused to discuss Nathan or the wedding or anything else personal. After a few days, people got the message and left her alone. Ethan called every few days, never pushing, just checking in. Sometimes they talked for hours about everything and nothing: books, movies, childhood memories, what they wanted from life. Sometimes the conversations were short and awkward, both of them still learning how to be in each other's lives without all the weight of their history crushing them. Charlotte started seeing a therapist, something she probably should have done years ago. Dr. Lisa Martinez was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, and she didn't let Charlotte get away with deflecting or minimizing. "You have a pattern," Dr. Martinez said during their 4th session. "You choose relationships where you can hide, where you don't have to be fully yourself because the other person isn't asking for it. Nathan didn't want a real partner. He wanted an accessory. That was safe for you because you didn't have to risk being vulnerable. And Ethan?" Charlotte asked. "Ethan wanted to protect you, which meant you didn't have to protect yourself. Also safe. Also a way to avoid being fully present in your own life." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "The question is, what do you actually want? Not what's safe, not what's expected. What do you want for yourself?" Charlotte thought about that question for days. What did she want? She'd spent so long defining herself by what other people needed from her that she'd forgotten to ask what she needed for herself. The answer, when it came, was simpler than she had expected. She wanted to matter, not as someone's wife or someone's project to protect, but as herself. She wanted work that meant something, relationships that were real, a life that was hers. 3 months after Nathan's arrest, Charlotte quit her job at the gallery. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, and one Tuesday morning she just walked into Margaret's office and gave her notice. "I appreciate the opportunity," Charlotte said, keeping her voice professional, "but I need to move on. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately." Margaret looked surprised but didn't try to talk her out of it. Charlotte suspected she was actually relieved. Having the woman who'd been engaged to a convicted fraudster on staff probably wasn't great for the gallery's image. Charlotte spent those 2 weeks updating her resume and reaching out to contacts in the art world. She had a degree in art history and 5 years of curatorial experience. Surely someone needed those skills. The offer came from an unexpected source, a nonprofit that worked with at-risk youth, using art education as a tool for empowerment and healing. They were looking for someone to develop and run their programs, someone who understood both the art world and the real-world challenges these kids were facing. The pay was less than half what Charlotte had been making at the gallery. The work would be harder, messier, more emotionally demanding. But when she met with the executive director and heard about the kids they were helping, about the lives they were changing, something clicked into place. "When can you start?" the director asked. 2 weeks, Charlotte said, and felt something like hope stirring in her chest for the first time in months. She called Ethan that night to tell him about the job. His response was immediate and genuine. "Charlotte, that's incredible. Congratulations." "Thanks. I'm terrified, honestly. I've never done anything like this before." "You're going to be amazing at it." Ethan's voice was warm. "Those kids are lucky to have you. We'll see. I might crash and burn spectacularly. Even if you do, you'll figure it out. You always do." Charlotte smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "When did you become so confident in me?" I've always been confident in you. I was just bad at showing it in healthy ways." They talked for another hour, and Charlotte found herself laughing at something Ethan said, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and genuine. When they finally hung up, she realized she was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. It had been a long time since she'd felt that way. Nathan's trial happened that spring. Charlotte was called to testify, and she walked into that courtroom with her head high and told the truth about everything: the engagement, the threats, the moment she'd discovered his other life. Nathan sat at the defense table looking smaller than she remembered, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. When Charlotte's testimony was done, she walked out without looking back. Whatever happened to Nathan Calloway was no longer her concern. She'd told her truth. The rest was up to the justice system. The jury found him guilty on all counts: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Jennifer got 8 years as a co-conspirator. Charlotte read about the sentencing in the paper and felt nothing but a distant sense of closure. That chapter of her life was over. 6 months after starting her new job, Charlotte was sitting in the nonprofit studio watching a 15-year-old girl named Maya work on a self-portrait. Maya had been in and out of foster care her whole life, had more reasons to be angry at the world than anyone should have to carry. But when she painted, something in her settled, became still and focused and almost peaceful. "That's beautiful," Charlotte said quietly, not wanting to disturb Maya's concentration. Maya glanced up, suspicious of praise like most of the kids were when they first started the program. "It's not done yet. I know, but it's still beautiful." Maya went back to painting, but Charlotte saw a small smile tug at the corner of her mouth. Charlotte's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Ethan. "Dinner this week? There's something I want to talk to you about." They'd been doing this for months now. Dinner every week or two, slowly rebuilding their friendship. It was careful and sometimes awkward, but it was real. Charlotte had learned things about Ethan she'd never known 7 years ago. He hated mushrooms. He read science fiction novels obsessively. He taught himself to play piano during the years they'd been apart because he'd remembered Charlotte mentioning once that she loved piano music. Charlotte texted back, "Thursday work? That new Italian place downtown?" The response came immediately. "Perfect. 7 p.m.? See you then." Charlotte put her phone away and turned her attention back to Maya, who was adding details to the portrait's eyes, making them fierce and defiant and alive. "Who taught you to paint like that?" Charlotte asked. Maya shrugged. "Nobody. I just do it." "Have you ever thought about going to art school?" "Can't afford it." "There are scholarships, programs for kids with talent. I could help you look into it if you're interested." Maya's hand stilled on the canvas. She looked at Charlotte with an expression that was equal parts hope and fear. "You think I'm good enough for that?" "I think you're talented enough that not developing that talent would be a waste," Charlotte said honestly. "But it's your choice. I'm just saying the option exists if you want it." Maya went back to painting, but Charlotte could see her thinking about it. That was how it worked with these kids. You planted seeds and hoped some of them took root. You couldn't force growth, could only create the conditions for it, and then step back. Thursday night arrived, and Charlotte found herself getting ready for dinner with more care than she usually took. She told herself it was just dinner with a friend, nothing special. But she also chose her outfit carefully, made sure her hair looked good, put on the silver bracelet Ethan had given her on her 18th birthday. She'd kept it all these years, even when she'd thought she'd never see him again. It had lived in the back of her jewelry box, too painful to wear, but too meaningful to throw away. Now she wore it almost daily, a reminder of promises kept and second chances earned. Ethan was already at the restaurant when she arrived, looking nervous in a way she'd rarely seen him. He stood when she approached the table, a gesture that was old-fashioned and somehow sweet. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thanks. You look nervous. What's going on?" They ordered food and made small talk while they waited, but Charlotte could tell Ethan was building up to something. Finally, after the entrees arrived, he took a breath and spoke. "I'm closing the security company," he said. Charlotte's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "What? Why?" "Because I built it for the wrong reasons. I built it to have power, to make sure no one could threaten me or the people I cared about. But that's not who I want to be anymore. I don't want to spend my life preparing for the next threat, living in constant defensive mode. Ethan met her eyes. I want to do something that actually helps people. Something constructive instead of just protective. What are you thinking? There's a foundation I've been working with. They provide security training and resources for domestic violence survivors. Women who are trying to escape dangerous situations but don't have the money for bodyguards or safe houses. I want to do that full time. Use what I know to help people who actually need it. Charlotte felt warmth spreading through her chest. Ethan, that's amazing. It's going to mean a significant pay cut. I'll have to downsize, probably sell the penthouse. But I have enough saved that I can afford to do work that matters instead of work that just pays well. He paused. I wanted to tell you because you're the one who made me start thinking about this. Watching you quit your job to work with those kids, watching you choose meaning over money, it made me realize I've been doing everything backwards. Charlotte reached across the table and took his hand. I'm proud of you, really proud. They ate dinner and talked about logistics, about timelines, about what this change would mean for Ethan's life. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, Charlotte realized something had shifted. The careful distance she'd been maintaining, the walls she'd kept up to protect herself, they'd started to come down without her even noticing. She was falling in love with Ethan again. Or maybe she'd never stopped. Maybe she'd just been waiting for him to become someone she could actually build a life with. Ethan, she said, interrupting him mid-sentence, I need to tell you something. He stopped talking, his expression suddenly concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I've been thinking about us, about where this is going. Okay. Ethan's voice was careful, guarded. When I said I needed time, when I said I needed us to be friends first, I meant it. And I still think that was the right choice. But I think... Charlotte took a breath. I think I'm ready for more than friendship now. If you are. If you still want that. Ethan's expression transformed. Hope and joy. And something that looked like relief all mixing together. Charlotte, I've wanted that since the moment I saw you walking down that aisle. I've just been waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready. Or at least, I'm ready to try. I can't promise it's going to be perfect. I'm probably going to have moments where I panic or pull back or need space. And you're probably going to have moments where your instincts tell you to protect me from things I need to face myself. But I think we can work through those things, if we're both willing to try. I'm willing, Ethan said immediately. I'm willing to try for as long as you'll let me. Charlotte smiled, feeling something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for 7 years. Then let's try. They left the restaurant walking close together, not quite touching but aware of each other in a way that felt both familiar and new. When they reached Charlotte's car, Ethan pulled her into a hug that was warm and solid and exactly what she needed. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. For giving me another chance. For not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for coming back, Charlotte replied, for keeping your promise. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other in a downtown parking garage while the city moved around them. Then Ethan pulled back just enough to look at her. Can I kiss you? He asked. Charlotte answered by pulling him down and kissing him herself. It was different from their first kiss all those years ago. Less uncertain, more grounded. A kiss between two adults who'd been broken and rebuilt and knew exactly what they were choosing. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. So what happens now? Ethan asked. Charlotte thought about it. Now we figure it out as we go. No grand plans, no trying to control the outcome. We just see where this goes. I can do that. Good. Because I'm done with men who think they need to have all the answers. Ethan laughed. Fair enough. How about this? I'll try to have fewer answers if you'll try to ask for help when you need it. Deal. The next year unfolded in a way Charlotte never could have predicted. She and Ethan took their time, building their relationship slowly and carefully. There were stumbles, moments when Ethan's protective instincts kicked in and he tried to solve Charlotte's problems without asking first, moments when Charlotte pulled away out of old habits of self-reliance. But they worked through each issue as it came up, learning each other's patterns and triggers and needs. Charlotte's program at the nonprofit grew. She helped 3 students get into art schools on full scholarships. She wrote grant proposals and developed curriculum and watched kids who'd been written off by everyone else discover they had talent and value and futures worth fighting for. The work was exhausting and sometimes heartbreaking, but it mattered in a way her gallery job never had. Ethan's foundation launched 6 months after he closed the security company. He hired former security professionals and trained them to work specifically with domestic violence survivors, teaching women how to recognize threats, how to protect themselves and their children, how to disappear safely if they needed to. He partnered with shelters and legal aid organizations and law enforcement agencies that actually cared about helping victims. Within the first year, they'd helped over 200 women escape dangerous situations. Charlotte's father warmed to Ethan gradually, seeing the changes in him and the way he treated Charlotte with respect and honesty. Her mother had never really doubted Ethan. She just wanted to make sure he deserved her daughter. By the time they celebrated their 1-year anniversary of being officially together, both of Charlotte's parents had welcomed Ethan back into the family completely. They got engaged on the anniversary of the day Ethan had crashed Charlotte's wedding. He didn't make it dramatic or showy, no helicopters this time. Just the two of them on that same rooftop where they'd made promises as teenagers, under stars that were barely visible through the light pollution. "I know you have complicated feelings about weddings," Ethan said, holding a simple ring that was nothing like the ostentatious diamond Nathan had given her. "So if you want to skip the ceremony entirely, if you want to just go to a courthouse, if you want to wait 10 more years, whatever you want, I'm good with it." Charlotte looked at the ring, then at Ethan. "I want a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Something real, not performative. Can we do that?" "We can do whatever you want." "Then yes, I'll marry you." They had the wedding 4 months later in Charlotte's parents' backyard, the same place where Ethan had first shown up all those years ago with everything he owned in a garbage bag. Charlotte wore a simple dress she'd found at a vintage store. Ethan wore a suit he had owned for years. There were 30 people there, all of them people who actually mattered to Charlotte and Ethan. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, the only sound was Charlotte's mother sniffling into a tissue. When they kissed as husband and wife, Charlotte felt something click into place that had been missing her entire life. Not completion, she'd learned she didn't need another person to complete her, but partnership. The sense of facing the world with someone who saw her clearly and chose to stand beside her anyway. At the reception, which was really just a barbecue in the backyard, Charlotte's father pulled Ethan aside. "You take care of her," he said, and it wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't entirely friendly either. "I will," Ethan promised, "by listening to what she needs and trusting her to know herself, by being her partner, not her protector." Charlotte's father studied him for a long moment, then nodded and pulled him into a hug. "Welcome back to the family, son." 2 years later, Charlotte was sitting in her office at the nonprofit when Maya walked in, still paint splattered from the studio. She was 17 now, taller and more confident than the scared 15-year-old Charlotte had first met. "I got in," Maya said, her voice shaking. "Full scholarship. They want me to start in the fall." Charlotte jumped up and hugged her, both of them crying happy tears. "I knew you would. I knew it." "I wouldn't have even applied if you hadn't pushed me," Maya said. "I didn't think I was good enough." "You were always good enough. You just needed someone to help you see it." After Maya left, practically floating with excitement, Charlotte sat back down at her desk and looked at the photos scattered across it. Her and Ethan on their wedding day. The first group of kids who'd graduated from her program. Her parents at their anniversary party. A candid shot of her and Ethan working together at his foundation's fundraiser, both of them laughing at something off camera. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Dinner at home tonight? I'm cooking." Charlotte smiled and texted back. "Perfect. I'll bring wine." As she packed up her things to head home, Charlotte thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, standing in that bridal suite in a wedding dress, about to marry a man who'd been systematically destroying her without her even knowing it. She thought about the desperate text she'd sent to someone she hadn't spoken to in 7 years, not really believing he'd come, but having nowhere else to turn. If someone had told her then that everything would work out, that she'd end up happy and married to Ethan and doing work that mattered, she wouldn't have believed it. The path from that bridal suite to here had been messy and painful and nothing like the fairy tale she'd imagined as a kid. But it was real. It was hers, and that made it better than any fairy tale could have been. Charlotte locked up her office and walked out to her car, already thinking about dinner and wine and the conversation she wanted to have with Ethan about maybe, possibly, thinking about starting a family. Not right away. They both had work they wanted to do first, but someday, when they were ready. Because that was the thing she'd learned through all of this. There was no perfect timing, no moment when everything was sorted and stable and completely safe. Life was messy and complicated and full of unexpected helicopters crashing weddings. You just had to find someone willing to navigate the mess with you, and then do the work of building something real together. Charlotte drove home through the city as evening fell, past the gallery where she used to work and the apartment where Nathan had threatened her, and the garden where her life had changed forever. Past all the places that had shaped her into who she was now. Broken pieces that had somehow, improbably, come together into something whole. When she walked into the house she and Ethan had bought together 6 months ago, he was in the kitchen making pasta and singing off-key to music only he could hear through his headphones. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting up with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Hey," he said, pulling out his headphones. "How was your day?" Charlotte set down the wine and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. "Maya got into art school, full scholarship." "That's incredible." Ethan hugged her back, one hand coming up to stroke her hair. "You did that. You changed her life." "She changed her own life. I just gave her the tools." "Same thing." They stood like that for a minute, swaying slightly to music that wasn't playing, comfortable in the kind of silence that only came from really knowing someone. Then Charlotte pulled back and looked up at Ethan. "I want to talk about something," she said. "Okay, should I be worried?" "No, but maybe pour us some wine first." Ethan poured 2 glasses and they moved to the couch, settling into their usual positions. Charlotte curled into the corner, Ethan angled toward her. The house was small compared to his old penthouse, but it was theirs. They'd chosen it together, painted the walls together, filled it with things that mattered to both of them. "So," Ethan said, "what did you want to talk about?" Charlotte took a breath. "I've been thinking about kids. Not now, but eventually. And I wanted to know how you felt about it." Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing. "Honestly, the idea terrifies me." "Because?" "Because I don't know how to be a father. I never had one, not really. I don't have a model for what that looks like when it's done right." "I don't know how to be a mother either," Charlotte pointed out. "Not perfectly. Nobody does. But you had good parents. You know what a healthy family looks like. And you have me. You have my parents. You have examples now that you didn't have before." Charlotte reached over and took his hand. "I'm not saying we need to decide this tonight. I'm just saying it's something I want someday. And I wanted to know if it was something you could want too." Ethan looked down at their joined hands, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "What if I mess it up? What if I turn into the kind of parent who tries to control everything because I'm terrified of something bad happening? Then I'll call you on it, and you'll work on it, same way you've worked on everything else." Charlotte squeezed his hand. "You're not the same person you were 2 years ago, Ethan. You've grown. You've changed. You've learned how to let people in instead of just protecting them from a distance." "Why would parenting be any different?" "Because the stakes are higher. Because a kid deserves better than a father who's still figuring out his issues. Every parent is still figuring out their issues. That's just part of being human." Charlotte shifted closer to him. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking if you can imagine us having a family together, if that's something you want to work toward." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Yeah, I can imagine it. And it terrifies me, but I want it. With you, I want it." Charlotte felt tears prick at her eyes, the good kind. "Okay then. Someday. When we're both ready." "Someday," Ethan agreed. They sat together as the evening darkened outside, talking about possibilities and fears and all the ways their future might unfold. And for the first time in her life, Charlotte wasn't afraid of the unknown. She'd learned that she was strong enough to handle whatever came, and that having someone to face it with made everything easier. The pasta burned while they talked, forgotten in the kitchen until the smoke alarm went off. They ordered pizza instead, laughing at their combined inability to have a serious conversation and cook at the same time. It was imperfect and chaotic, and exactly what Charlotte had learned to love about their life together. Later that night, lying in bed with Ethan's arm around her and the city sounds filtering through the window, Charlotte thought about everything that had led her here. The broken promises and the ones that were kept. The wedding that never happened and the one that did. The 7 years of silence and the 2 years of building something real. She thought about Nathan, serving his sentence in federal prison, and Jennifer and hers. She thought about Michael, now 6 years old, being raised by grandparents who loved him, and a trust fund that would give him opportunities his parents' choices had nearly destroyed. She thought about Maya and all the other kids she'd helped, lives changed through art and belief, and someone caring enough to push them toward their potential. She thought about Ethan and the journey he'd taken from scared 16-year-old to the man lying beside her now. About all the ways he'd had to break himself apart and rebuild to become someone capable of healthy love. And she thought about herself. About the girl who'd been so desperate for safety that she'd almost married her own destruction, and the woman she'd become who knew that real safety came from within, from knowing yourself well enough to make good choices, from having people who loved you honestly instead of possessively, from doing work that mattered and building a life that was authentically yours. "You still awake?" Ethan murmured in the darkness. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how grateful I am. For all of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, because they taught me what I actually needed." Ethan pulled her closer. "I'm grateful too. For you giving me a second chance. For you being patient while I figured out how to be better." "We figured it out together," Charlotte corrected. "That's the whole point." They fell asleep like that, tangled together in a bed in a house they'd chosen together, building a life that was messy and real and completely their own. And if Charlotte dreamed of helicopters and wedding dresses and rooftop promises, they were good dreams now. Memories that had lost their sting and become just part of her story. The story of how she'd learned to save herself, and in doing so, had found her way back to the one person who'd always been worth saving herself for.